Hey gals and guys, this is Michael Ferrari of Cinema de Meep. Welcome to episode 49 of the Retro Movie Love Podcast. With me today is my good pal David Nofire. Say hi, David.
Hey Michael, hey everybody out there listening. I'm so happy to be out on this particular episode because we're going to be talking about teen horror. I'm excited to do it today.
Same here. The episode 48 was all about teen angst. I think the natural progression from teen angst, certainly from movies growing up, for me, it was teen horror. I've just always loved teen movies in general, and then seeing the mix of the two in the 80s, as we saw, with teens in peril, this time fighting for their lives for the most part, or getting slashed off, was always so much fun for me, and so I gravitated towards those films. And that's why I wanted to talk about them today. How about you?
Yeah, definitely. I think that this kind of came to be because of a couple of the films. Well, we started talking about doing another podcast together, and I mentioned a couple films that I'll be bringing up today, and it seemed to sort of play off of your idea, or maybe you'd already done the podcast of the teen angst one. So I think it's going to bookend it pretty nicely. At least I hope it will.
Oh, I think it will. I think it's a good pairing. For sure. I seem to always talk about teen films or want to talk about teen films. So getting to talk about teen angst and then now teen horror kind of feels like a very fitting way to spend my Halloween. And what are you doing for Halloween this year?
I don't have any plans. This Halloween, my girlfriend and I, her daughter is 10, and she is going to be hanging out with another friend. And so this is going to be kind of our first time in a while where we're not going to be going trick-or-treating or anything like that. So maybe just handing out some candy. Not really sure yet.
Nice. I think, we'll be doing the typical trick-or-treating like we did last year here in New Jersey. And also we will be giving out candy, so look out for those razor blades. It's going to be fun. I think I had a lot of fun last year doing it, and the kids really enjoyed giving out candy. That was like their highlight. And when we were in California, for some reason we didn't get many trick-or-treaters. So it was nice having so many of them last year. So we're fully prepared and fully stocked for this week. We're recording this a couple days, a mere 2 days before Halloween, so hopefully we can get this out on the day or before actual Halloween. But we're definitely in that Halloween spirit, which is a good segue for our recently seen. Let's talk about what we've watched recently. I know there's a movie in there with Halloween in the title.
Yes, a movie that I'm sure been anticipating quite a lot for most of this year. It's what do you retcon? What would you call this thing? It's where they've ignored all the films except for the first one, and Jamie Lee Curtis is back, and that's for the brand new Halloween, the H4O, I guess, instead of H2O this time.
Right. So, what did you think?
Okay, I think that anything short of a great movie with Halloween, for me anyways, is going to be a bit of a disappointment because of the letdown, or a bit of a letdown because of the anticipation. But then you take a step back and then just kind of look at it a little closer. And I was entertained by the movie. I know it's got a couple big problems, and I think I might have liked it a little more than you did, but I didn't love it. It was fun. It had, it started off a little rough with those podcasters confronting Michael in the checkerboard grounds of the psychiatric institute. But it had enough moments to where I would say I didn't feel burned. I liked it, but there's definitely some ways that I would rather it have gone, particularly with the character of Laurie Strode.
Right.
I know that this is a movie that is an empowering movie for her character and the three generations of the Strodes, but at the same time, we don't get a whole lot out of her character other than what we already know, which is that she's been preparing for this moment, and that she's, deeply scarred by the events of the film. And I just kind of wanted a little bit more with her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was my problem with it. I think because of the ads for it, which greatly build up, like, this is Laurie's story. This is Laurie Strode ready to take on Michael, fully prepared to take on Michael, to go after Michael. So I'm like, wow, this is going to be great. This is going to be like a whole movie of that. It's not quite that. It really is those scenes that you've seen in the trailer, and then the final battle at the end. So I felt a little bit gypped. Just honestly, I felt like there was some unnecessary additions, like you mentioned, the podcasters. How dare they make podcasters so annoying? And a certain other character who I'm not going to say. I don't want to spoil anything. I know some of you out there haven't seen it. It's the number one movie. It's done really, really, really well. There will be sequels. It's just doing phenomenal business. So those of you who haven't seen it, we'll check it out eventually. I had fun with certain elements of it. As a slasher movie, I mentioned this on the Patreon episode. As a slasher movie, it's a fun enough slasher movie. There's some good set pieces in it, particularly the scenes where Michael is, that scene in the trailer where it's a tracking shot of him going to Elrod's house, and then he's on the streets of Haddonfield. Really, I want to say street because it seems like only one street in Haddonfield is decorated for Halloween. It's very done up, that one street anyway. And he's, it's like, it feels like a Halloween movie in that regard. That's when it felt like a pure Halloween movie. But there's a lot of other elements in there that just kind of feel a little distracting and a little wonky, to say the least, and some comedy bits which really didn't hit home for me. But I'm very critical, I guess, of this movie, only because Halloween is so dear to my heart, and this promises to be, a great companion piece to the original, which is my favorite horror movie of all time. So, and I'm not the only person who holds Halloween dear to their heart. So, it's gonna upset some people, and it's also gonna really draw a lot of people to it as well. So, and I totally understand that, and I'm all for it. I'm also all for all the slasher movies to come in theaters, because this was obviously a big success. And I'm game for sequels, which Blumhouse, I don't think there's any spoiler involved. Blumhouse has the sequel in production already. I think they're ready to go with something, or at least I won't say exactly with what characters or whoever survives, but it's I'm ready for that, because I think that could be fun. But yeah, did I want more out of Halloween H40? Yes, but it's good enough for what it is, I guess.
Yeah, same. It's a soft like from me. I did like it, but it's got the issues that we talked about, and those things are not necessarily going to bother everyone. Some people I know love that movie. I'm a little more critical of it, and maybe I'm being too critical, but I think we're on the same page with this one. But I'm just a slightly more in favor of it than you are, I think.
Right, and I also thought, I revisited H2O, which I hadn't seen in a while, because I think I played it out too much. I really liked H2O when it came out in theaters, but I think I kind of softened it. It softened to me over the years, and I remember the last viewing a few years ago, I wasn't that into it. I felt a little too much of that time period where I didn't really care about the teenage characters at all. It just maybe didn't feel as strong as it could have been. But now looking at it again, which I watched it recently, I'm like, oh, this is actually a pretty good movie. It's pretty entertaining. It's 86 minutes long. It's direct to the point. There's a lot of Laurie Strode in it. Jamie Lee Curtis owns that movie. She's great in that movie. She is the movie, really. if you look at it. Like the teens really do take kind of like a they take the backseat to Laurie Strode in that movie, and that's what it should have been, and that's what it should be. It should have been in this new one too. But I don't know, she's great in that movie. She gives a really good performance. So yeah, I can revisit that one more. So that's good. I'm glad I warmed up to that one. I also saw in theaters. I did a double feature of the Goosebumps sequel, along with The House with the Clock in Its Walls.
Ooh, how is that double feature?
That's it's a kind of a kiddie horror double feature, but it's Halloween time, so so I thought, okay, it's a good time to see these. My kids aren't into those movies; they're not into scary movies yet, so just me. So I had fun actually watching them. They're not great. Goosebumps, I would say, is the lesser of the two, because it feels a little safe. Whereas House with the Clock in Its Walls, if I was a, like 8-year-old kid, 6-year-old kid or whatever, watching that, I would be pretty scared. Actually, my son saw it before I saw it. My wife took him like a few weeks ago, and he said it was scary, and he was not into it. I was more into it, I guess. I thought it was entertaining enough. Not a perfect movie by any means. But I like some of the time period it was set in and some things about it. So entertaining.
Good. Yeah, I didn't get a real sense of any kind of scariness from the trailer for The House and the Clock and Wall, so it's good to hear that it's got a bit of bite to it.
It has a bit of there's a bit of creepiness in it, like there's creepy dolls in it and there's blood, whereas Goosebumps feels very sanitized. As it probably should be. It's it's Goosebumps. It's not meant to be dark and really disturbing, but it definitely feels a little bit more for the little ones. But entertaining enough for sure. How about you? Anything else you've seen?
I haven't seen a whole lot of genre stuff here recently. I have this Movie Pass, not the big one that's the company that's kind of taken a few hits recently, but it's an AMC one specific to the theater.
Yeah, I have that too.
Yeah, and so I go to a lot of movies, but I also have some sleep issues. So I've been kind of like nodding. Someone told me that I'm paying to nap sometimes in movies, but I have seen a few movies and nothing recently that I loved. I think that I did like, and this is kind of going way back, but I did like that movie with John Cho, Searching. Was that? Yeah, was that the name of that movie? Yeah, I liked that movie. And there have been a few others here recently, but not a whole lot that comes to mind. I'd have to be a little hard pressed for it. Some of them are kind of, first rate productions, but not something that I particularly warmed to, but I liked all right, like First Man, for example.
Right.
But I'm hoping for some good stuff coming up here in the next month or so. Oh, Suspiria. Have you seen that yet?
I haven't seen it. I think I've been a little hesitant with a lot of these new ones that come out this month because they're all they all seem to be 2 hours and 15 minutes or longer.
Yeah.
The singing one, the Star is Born one is over 2 hours. First Man is 2 hours and 20 minutes, and Suspiria is 2.5 hours. And yeah, I get tired too sometimes in a movie theater if I'm there too long. If you're in an AMC theater too, you have like those 20-30 minutes of trailers and commercials, and so you're in a theater for a really long time, and I have to devote a lot of time to it. And I'll get tired if the movie isn't really keeping me awake. But I haven't seen a lot of those. I saw Hellfest. Oh,
I saw that. That was fun.
It's not like a major horror movie or of any kind, but it did what it wanted to do. It felt like kind of being in a haunt, one of those haunts for like 90 minutes, and I had fun with that. I think it was a good, fun slasher movie. I saw A Simple Favor.
Yeah, I liked that for the most part too. What about you?
I really enjoyed that one, actually. It kind of surprised me how much I liked it. It's kind of a thriller noir, but also a comedy.
Mm-hmm.
which kind of surprised me. And Blake Lively is actually really entertaining in that movie. And so yeah, I highly recommend that one. I think that one's going to grow on me even more with multiple viewings because it has some twists and turns in it too. And I think we need to talk about one more movie
Okay.
that we both saw in September. A movie I think we've probably been anticipating. I know you have, and that's The Predator.
Oh, The Predator. Okay. Okay. Have you talked about it on a podcast
I'm
yet?
not sure if I have. I probably
Okay.
haven't, but yeah.
Yeah, I really that one was a tough one because the pedigree involved with this film,
Right.
directed by Shane Black, written by Fred Decker and Shane Black, and just the idea of it kind of giving a shot in the arm to a franchise that really hasn't had a good film since Predator 2. It was a mess. It was just a big mess. It was funny and entertaining in spots, but man, it sure did feel like there were so many reshoots involved. I mean, if I hadn't read that there were, I would have figured out that they probably reshot this ending or that stuff because it just didn't. To me, it just wasn't a cohesive experience. I wasn't against all the humor. Some people don't like all the humor that was injected into it. I liked it, for the most part, the humor. But to me, it was just the story just kind of didn't stay true to itself. I think they just kind of didn't trust it to be its own thing and just shot a completely new third act.
Right. That's it's funny because that's exactly what happened with Halloween. They shot the whole final act over.
Really, the new one?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah, there was from what I've read in the test screenings that there was a whole other ending to that movie that they reshot. They went back and reshot it. I'm not sure if the original ending from what it was described was any better. So it'll be interesting seeing that movie when it ends up on Blu-ray to see if they have that original footage. I would say that the original ending was a lot more open-ended.
Uh-huh.
And I know some people have mentioned that they wanted to do like a two-parter to it. Probably to milk more money. I don't know. But they went a different way with this. You'll see it. With the Predator, I'm not sure what was reshot with that third. I know it was like a whole other kind of thing. It was like a big set piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
That they took out, and I don't remember exactly what happens in the third act. I remember some major characters. Like, did that guy die? I couldn't tell.
Yeah, I'm the same way. There's a particular character who makes an impression with his performance. I'm not going to say who it is, but
Right.
after I watched the movie, I was just like, what happened to him at the end? I don't really remember.
I know I had to ask somebody. They're like, "Oh yeah, he got it a certain way, but it was like so fast, and you would miss it if you weren't like completely focused on his character." I'm like, okay. Yeah, it's a bit, yeah, like you said, it is a mess of a movie. And it does feel like either studio hands were involved and there were notes involved and a lot of people were putting their imprint on it. And I guess that's kind of like what I felt with Halloween. It's kind of took it away from Shane Black and did something else, but I don't know. I kind of enjoyed it anyway, I guess, because it didn't. I guess the whole movie didn't really take itself too seriously from the beginning, so it was entertaining enough for me to enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say it's a great movie by any stretch of the imagination. I thought it was just fun, and I think I'll probably get it on Blu-ray and watch it and enjoy it for what it is. But yeah, it isn't like the Predator that we were kind of building up in our mind.
Right.
But I guess that seems to be the running theme with returning to these franchises. Like maybe our expectations are a little high, but also at the same time, I don't know. There seems to be forces at work to kind of interfere with these projects. So we're not.
Well, I will say, it's interesting to talk about both of these movies because from one standpoint, the Halloween movie is a big success in that it kind of cultivated the nostalgia for the films in a way that made a huge audience come to the
Right.
movie.
Hmm.
And The Predator was more of its own thing, which can be a good thing, but it just didn't quite work for me.
Right.
But they sure did a good job with knowing what people wanted in this new Halloween, but not quite. I mean, maybe not quite delivering
Hmm.
exactly that thing, but at least putting together a good trailer and getting people excited for it.
Right. Yeah. I definitely agree. They definitely got the butts in the seats, and that's part of good good job with marketing to do that, right?
Yeah.
Predator, I think, yeah, people were like, were staying away because they knew something was wrong, and yeah, there is something wrong, but I don't know. I kind of enjoyed it too because it was a bit silly, and sometimes in the mood for like a silly kind of action sci-fi movie. So, but I will never hold it at a high standard for sure, and I expect Shane Black will rebound with something more along the lines of his other work. I think I'm sure he'll get back on track. Hopefully, it doesn't involve like it was a movie he was going to do with The Rock. I think, right?
Yeah, he was. I can't remember the name of it, but
Yeah.
that's been kind of in the works for a while, or at least talked about for a while.
Yeah. I don't know. Hopefully, it's something that kind of is pandering to more mass audiences. Something that I want something that feels like real Shane Black and real fun and smart. Anyway, I had fun with The Predator. Let's get into our teen horror lists. So we're gonna do 10 movies each. I cheated to have a double feature, of course. Here's your number 10. It's our TV spot.
You've heard of raising spirits from the dead by incantations, right? I did that by playing a record backwards.
These evil people have just got to be stopped.
What have you done to your stereo?
I wanted a new one.
Trick or Treat, rated R. Starts Friday, October 24th at theaters everywhere.
All right. Well, this being Halloween, I thought it would be appropriate to put in a Halloween-themed movie. And number 10 on my list is the 1986 film Trick or Treat, directed by Charles Martin Smith. And this movie is a movie that has a great concept. It's about a lonely kind of outcast guy who is picked on, and he is, ostracized and bullied and made fun of. And we will see this as a theme throughout each of our lists, I believe.
For sure.
Films that just kind of play off of that Carrie template, which was done so well with that book and film. So this movie stars Mark Price, who was Skippy on Family Ties, and he plays the main character who his idol is this heavy metal singer named Sammy Kerr, and he's watching a news story about him, and then he finds out that he's died in a fire. But it turns out that he hasn't died in a fire so much as he has put his plans for the town on a record to be played backwards, and there's resurrection and all sorts of stuff coming out if we follow this plan. And it's got cameos by Gene Simmons and Ozzy Osbourne, and it's a fun movie. I think it's got a wonderful concept, and I like the music from Fastway. The guy who plays Sammy Kerr is wonderful. I think that the movie, maybe outstays its welcome a little bit. It goes a little long, but on the whole, I did enjoy this movie, and I think they're just going to get more exciting for me as we go down to number one. What were your quick thoughts on this one?
Oh, I mean, I've always really enjoyed this movie, Trick or Treat. It's the perfect way to start this. Getting a Halloween movie in there. I think I have one too for my number 10. I really enjoy it. I mean, I like watching this movie. I think it really holds up well over the years. It definitely is a portrait of that time period. But at the same time, it has relatable characters and a storyline that you can get behind. And yes, that hysteria that happened in the 80s with rock music was a thing, and I do remember it. And I just think it's, it's very silly in hindsight, but our world is kind of crazy as it is now. So, I believe anything could happen, for sure. And, I don't know. I think it's a good slasher movie, and I was very surprised it was never released, on Blu-ray here in the US. I guess maybe music rights are holding it up. It was a Dino De Laurentiis, production. So it was filmed in Wilmington, North Carolina, in his studio there. I think we might have do we have any other Wilmington movies on here? Maybe not, but, I've always enjoyed it. It has a good atmosphere to it, and it has that pure 80s kind of rock movie, horror movie vibe to it. It's one of the best ones, if not the best, of the heavy metal horror movies of the mid to late 80s, for sure, I would say. And I go back to it. And I love that it was directed by Charles Martin Smith, of all people, who also did, I think, the pilot for Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's right. He did.
Yeah, so he's kind of set the tone there, which is nice and interesting. Surprised he doesn't do more horror. You should. So yeah, I'm a fan. Thank you for picking it. Here is my number 10.
Strange Behavior. A movie of mystery, horror, and suspense.
Clear and unnatural picture begins to form in my mind. They're going to strap me into some chair and pull from my gray cell.
Would you just wait a minute and listen to me? 2 sessions, 2 days, $100 a day.
Behavior is nothing more than the sum of the mechanical activities of our bodies.
I was just wondering, are you doing anything tonight?
Oh, he's dead. And the dead don't come back and take revenge.
Somebody help me!
We've heard your views on our work in the past, Mr. Brady.
Save the crap for somebody else. You got a list of people in the program?
Now just relax, Pete. It'll be over in no time.
It started all over again.
Let me go! Let me go!
Pete, what's wrong?
I don't feel so.
Pete!
Mr. Brady, I see you found your way.
Pete, are you ready?
The choice is yours, Mr. Brady. Either give him the gun or shoot him. The choice is yours, Mr. Brady.
Oh, Jesus. What did you do to my kid? What did you do?
Strange Behavior.
Okay, I went with a weird one for my number 10. Dead Kids, also known as Strange Behavior. I grew up with it as Strange Behavior. That's what it was on VHS when I first saw it. I remember it was on an RCA Columbia videotape. So, like, what is this movie? It's like a studio movie that's like, it looks like a weird kind of direct-to-video kind of horror movie. I rented it, and it was actually surprisingly good. It has a lot of good actors in it. It has a really good score by Tangerine Dream. It's kind of weird because it was shot in New Zealand, of all places. And so it has a kind of weird vibe to it. Like a lot of these kinds of movies that pretend to be America but are actually filmed in foreign countries, like, say, Pieces. So it has like an off-kilter vibe to it, but it also has a really interesting vibe because of that Tangerine Dream music and the visuals. I think Michael Laughlin directed this movie. He's made some interesting films, and it doesn't feel like the average teen slasher movie. It feels like a bit of something more, and because of where the plot goes, it becomes kind of like a mad scientist movie as well. This is the movie that has Halloween in it. There's a Halloween dance going on in this movie, like a literal choreographed dance scene in this movie, kind of early on. Bill Condon wrote this movie, of Gods and Monsters, and he's made other things, big things, Dreamgirls. And so it has a weird history and good actors, like I said, like Michael Murphy, Louise Fletcher's in there, quite a few interesting people. So it has this weird, interesting vibe for a teen slasher movie / mad scientist movie. So I'm into it. It's a hard movie to recommend because I've actually recommended this movie to people before, and some people really like it, and some people actually hate it. I think maybe because of the off-kilter vibe kind of bothers people. It's kind of talky too, so that might annoy people. Have you seen it?
I have seen it, yeah. I did see it when I was a kid, and when I saw it, on cable as a young kid, I didn't notice things like the fact that it's obviously shot not in America, but it's trying to, pass itself off as something like that. Mm-hmm. It's super obvious that it's not shot in America. It is a fun movie, and there is some strange behavior. There are a couple of disturbing things in there where I remember, like seeing it, but I don't remember a whole lot of details about it. And I do remember a couple of things that happen in the film. One involving someone urinating blood, some disturbing stuff in there.
Right.
Hard to forget stuff. But I did like the film on this rewatch because it has these kind of little bursts of humor in them. Like at the beginning, the main character, I think it's the main character, is listening to the radio and someone's talking about, the DJ's talking about a drowning and that 3 people have died. And he said, for all those of you that didn't drown, here's something for you coming up. And it's just this odd kind of sense of humor to it too.
Yeah, it's very oddball. And you kind of have to be in the mood for that. But also, I guess if you're in the mood for something Halloween-y, that's odd too. Yeah, I would definitely recommend it. It's the best time of the year for something odd and Halloween-y, for sure. Let's get into your number 9. Here's a TV spot.
Out by 16 or dead in the scene, but together forever. They're just being normal teenage girls.
I'm not dying in this room with you! I'm not dying!
We're almost not even related anymore.
Okay, this is Ginger Snaps. It's a 2000 movie. It was directed by John Fawcett, who's done a lot of TV work. He recently directed several episodes of the show Orphan Black, and it stars Catherine Isabel and Emily Perkins as 2 sisters who are very close, and they're growing up together, and they start to separate from each other, and Ginger starts to become interested in boys, and she starts to she has her period, and she's basically kind of growing apart from her sister. And at the same time, she has been bitten by a werewolf. So this is a movie that really kind of has these metaphors for growing up, and they use them through the werewolf motif. And it's very on the surface, but it's also very fun. Mm-hmm. And I think that werewolf movies are kind of like the good ones. There are a lot more bad ones than there are good ones, and I think that this is a good one, and it's a pretty well written movie too, I think, and I do like the relationship between Ginger and Bridget in this film.
I love this movie. I think when I first saw it, I was like, it was something kind of unexpected as a werewolf movie. I guess werewolf movies weren't really that in vogue in the early 2000s. But then having a teen girl werewolf movie seemed like, oh, this is okay. This is going to be interesting. And actually exactly what it is. It's very interesting. It's actually much more intelligent than the average, like, a monster movie for sure. There's a lot going on with the screenplay, I think, and the relationship between the 2 sisters, and yes, the very obvious metaphors to being a teenage girl and reaching a certain age and becoming a woman and changing and things that are changing. It's very on the surface, like you said, very obvious, but I think that's kind of the point. It's meant to be in your face and obvious, and I like that about it. It's really doesn't shy away from its themes. It's so often a horror movie can like use the themes to tell its story, but kind of hide them in a way. I think this movie does not do that at all.
It does not hide them at all.
This movie, like, everything is shown, like the blood and guts of it all is really in your face and shown, and I like that. It doesn't shy away from anything, and where it goes, it gets pretty dark and gruesome, but it's never like dark and gruesome in those 2000s kind of torture porny way. It's never like that. It feels very much like a good balance of dark and comedy and entertaining. I really like that about it. It's a really well done movie, and I think especially the screenplay, really well written. It's good having a female voice in a screenplay, especially if it's about two girls. Too often, a lot of these movies are written and directed by men, and kind of don't really get it. And this movie kind of gets it. It's one of the rare movies about that subject that really gets it, and I like it. I have seen the sequels, but not quite as good, but also not too bad either.
I think I've only seen the second one. I do not recall seeing the third one at all. Is the third one, that's a prequel, right?
Yeah, the third one is, I think, a prequel. I think it's kind of a period piece, to use a bad pun.
Right.
Yes. No pun intended. Really. I liked it. I remember liking it, but not quite as much as the second of the first, especially the first. Good film. And it's on Blu-ray. Scream Factory put it out, so definitely available. And I think, also so far, Trick or Treat, not on Blu-ray, but been released on like kind of crappy DVDs. It's on Blu-ray in Germany. I have the German Blu-ray. So hopefully it'll get a US release. And Strange Behavior is on Blu-ray in the US as Dead Kids. So for those of you keeping tally.
I am hoping that that Trick or Treat comes out through Vestron Video, because they did just put out that Dino De Laurentiis production, Maximum Overdrive, right just a couple weeks ago. So I'm hoping that they pick this one up as well.
They should. They really should. So hopefully that it will happen. Here is my number 9. I'm going to do a double feature. Here's the first one.
Something strange.
I didn't think much about it until I saw him drag the body out of the coffin.
Something evil.
Bury your own.
Something terrifying is happening in Ludlow, Maine. Again. Pet Cemetery 2.
No brain, no pain.
Starts Friday, August 28th at theaters everywhere.
Okay, my first in my double feature, Pet Sematary 2. It's about loss. It's about if you've seen Pet Sematary 1, you kind of get where it's going to go with some of the things that happens. But I like this movie because it feels very much like its own thing, even though it's a sequel to the first one. I like that it's Edward Furlong making it a teen movie. This is kind of an Edward Furlong double feature, by the way, guys. I snuck an Edward Furlong double feature in here. He was actually good and intense of an actor. He was actually really good in this movie. I think he doesn't get enough credit. I know he's had some personal problems over the years, and that's kind of definitely wrecked his career. But he was a really good kid actor. And, when you're a good kid actor and you're young and you put all this pressure on... all this pressure's put on you, and your parents are maybe not the best parents who can handle that sort of thing. It just, it could really fuck you up. And Macaulay Culkin can tell you that too. He was good in this movie. I think you really kind of follow his character, and his loss with his mom, and then moving to this town where, yes, things can get reanimated, and they do. And they come back to life, and they're not quite the same, and they will fuck you up. And one of the biggest things I appreciate about this movie is Clancy Brown and his performance, which is completely crazy. And he just really like goes over, not over the top, but he goes above and beyond for a sequel to a prestigious kind of movie. And he's just great to watch. He really is really funny and scary at the same time as Clancy Brown. He's that intense Clancy Brown that we all know, but then he does kind of funny things with it, and it's kind of very unexpected. I remember seeing it in the theater. I'm like, holy shit, this guy's good. And then I realized, oh, it's Clancy Brown from like Bad Boys, and like, wow, this guy has tremendous range. He could actually be funny and scary at the same time. Not many actors can do that. I just remember those scenes, especially in this movie, and then I don't know, I really dig it as a sequel. I think it's actually a really solid sequel. I get into the characters, I get into the story and its atmosphere that it creates in this town. They didn't film in Maine like they did the first one. I think they filmed more down south, but it kind of matches enough. And again, yeah, with Edward Furlong at the lead and having a character you kind of sort of sympathize with at the same time, but also can get prepared to be creeped out by. He kind of does a good balance there, which I like. Have you seen this one?
I have. It's been a while since I've seen it. I do remember Clancy Brown in this movie quite well, and I remember there's a pretty good relationship between Edward Furlong and his buddy. But aside from that, it's kind of, to me, it's sort of like in the shadow of the first one. So whenever I think about that series, I mostly gravitate towards the first one.
Yeah, I think a lot of people forget this one exists.
yeah.
Which kind of saddens me because I think it's actually a good movie on its own. Oh well. You want to say something else?
Oh, I was just going to say I love the tagline "Raise Some Hell" from Pet Sematary 2. I believe that was on the poster there. I remember.
Yeah, it's kind of direct and to the point. That's what happens. And yeah, there's gonna be the inevitable raising of the dead in this movie, and it happens a few times, and it's good. And there's some like surprisingly sweet moments in it. And there's surprisingly sad moments with some characters who die, who you feel really bad about. I like that about it. Mary Lambert directed it, so keeping the continuity of the same director, I think she was really good. And even though it's not really an official Stephen King movie, it had nothing to do with it, obviously. It was a sequel to capitalize on the success of the first one. But I think as a sequel, I think it's pretty strong, and I really enjoy it. And I'd love to see a Blu-ray of it. It's only on DVD currently. My part 2 is a movie that is on Blu-ray. Here is the TV spot.
Imagine a game that knows your fears, fulfills your fantasies, and owns your mind. Now, imagine the game is real.
Play it, Michael.
Brain Scan, the ultimate head trip. Rated R. At theaters April 22nd.
Brain Scan. Yes, Brain Scan was recently released by Scream Factory on Blu-ray. Edward Furlong again in a kind of a techno slasher, I guess you would call it that, about a kid who gets this CD-ROM that... remember CD-ROMs? do you actually remember them? I remember them. I don't remember using a lot of them, but...
I do remember them, yeah. And I worked at in a media center at the library at the time. Well, not when this movie came out, but towards the end of. I wouldn't say CD-ROMs ever had a heyday, but they still existed. So buy a few of them for the library, and they never really were hugely circulated.
Right. So he plays a CD-ROM game, and then of course the game comes to life, and there's a trickster character who's kind of reminiscent of Freddy Krueger, and he kind of tricks him into murdering people, or lets loose something dark within him to want to murder people. It's an interesting story. Andrew Kevin Walker wrote it. Not directed it. And he's famous for screenplays for Seven and a few other interesting horror things. I like it. I think it's an entertaining movie. I think for a teen, it's a pure teen horror movie, which is why it's on this list. Again, Edward Furlong giving a pretty good performance, and another good performance by him. I really like this guy in the 90s. He is believable. I mean, the role, and he's someone, again, a character who's suffering a loss. He seems to be always losing his parents in all the movies that he was in the 90s, including Terminator 2, right? At some point. And he's mourning someone, but at the same time, he's trying to get on with his life. And then this thing comes along. He seems to have a very generous father who lets him have whatever he wants. So he has a room that's all decked out in Fangoria posters and music and neon and endless media for Edward Furlong in this movie. It's kind of a 90s kid's dream in a way. He even has like a kind of a game chair. It's something you don't really see in a lot of movies of the time. It felt a little bit 90s in that regard, and I don't know. It very much feels of its time, but it's something that I very much enjoy. It's also a lot more dark and gruesome than you think it's going to be, because it's kind of it feels like kind of like a polished studio movie, but at the same time it does get pretty dark and gruesome. And it was directed by the guy who did the movie where Rolling Thunder, what's his face?
That's right, John Flynn.
John Flynn directed it, and that was a really good, gritty 70s kind of exploitation movie. And here, I kind of like he does like a polished studio 90s exploitation movie. It was an interesting choice for director, and I really enjoyed it. How about you?
I really enjoyed it too. I missed out on it at the theater, and I know that it's got a very big following, and a lot of people were excited whenever it was announced that it was coming out on Blu-ray. And so I knew we were going to do this podcast, so I bought a copy of it and watched it. And I think that 90s nostalgia is big right now, and I think this movie taps into that, or at least you can tap into 90s nostalgia very easily with this film.
Yeah.
Based off of what you just said about the room that he lives in and all the media and his phone assistant that he has, his butler, that dials all the numbers for him.
Yeah.
And the CD-ROM stuff. It's all it's a little cheesy now and dated, but it's a whole lot of fun. And I did like the trickster character. Looking at him from the poster, he's surprisingly flamboyant for what he looks like, just like from the poster. I didn't really know. He kind of looks a little bit, I was thinking like maybe like a little touch of Rawhead Rex or something, because of his hair and stuff. But he is kind of a funny character, especially like there's one part when he just he's hanging around at the end of a scene and he's looking at the TV, and then there's a Three Stooges bit on TV, and he starts watching it. He just gets entranced with this Three Stooges bit. He's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's like kind of surprised. I'm kind of surprised that I actually get into that character, because it does feel a little bit like forced. Like, they're trying to do like a kind of a new Freddy kind of thing, but then he's like actually kind of charismatic and interesting, and it helps when you have that character who's there's a good actor behind it, and kind of likes the subtleties and nuances, and does interesting things like you mentioned at the end of a scene. So that really helps, and it's a good 90s movie that kind of gets better with each viewing, I think, for me. And it has like, the kid who like longs for the girl, the literal girl next door, and now that girl next door, I remember kind of having a bit of a crush on her in the movie when it came out. Now she's like in everything. She's like the mom in everything. She's in that Netflix show about the girl who got killed or committed suicide. She's a mom in that.
Oh, 13 Reasons Why.
Yeah, she's in that.
Is that the one?
Yes, yeah. And she's the mom in like in Homeland and a few other things. So she actually has had a flourishing career. But sometimes it all goes back to playing the cute girl next door, or who shows her boobs. So that was always good in an R-rated horror movie for teenagers. Didn't do very well at the box office because, again, you R-rated teens and weren't able to see it. Same thing for Pet Sematary 2. That did much better. That did because that had the built-in audience for people who like the first one. I saw both of these at actually the same theater on the same screen at the Lowe's Oriental Theater, former Movie Palace, on their main screen. So it was a very big screen with good sound. So I remember enjoying that experience for both of these movies, released 2 years apart from each other. Good times in the 90s, for sure.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with you that it is a little more gruesome than you're expecting, especially the opening and some of the murder stuff in between. And I also appreciate that the movie is not a typical like revenge type film. The way that it approaches what's its storyline, that's not really so much of a plot point in this one.
Right. It really kind of like just taps into something in the character, and you kind of follow the character. And I like that about it. And that was unusual too for the time. So that's cool. Let's move on to your number 8. Here's a TV spot.
Hi, Mary Lou speaking. Sorry I can't come to the phone right now. But I'm busy at the prom. Places to go. Bye-bye.
Hello, Mary Lou. Prom Night 2.
Starts Friday, October 9th at a Famous Players Theater near you. Check local listings.
Okay, my number 8 is called Hello, Mary Lou, Prom Night 2. It's from 1987. It's directed by Bruce Pittman, who mostly has done a lot of TV stuff. And we were talking in the last film about a kind of Freddy Krueger type character. And I think that this film has a character that is somewhat inspired by that. But I think that on the whole, this movie is sort of a mashup of a number of movies. You've got your possession stuff, so you've got your Exorcist stuff, and there's a priest character in it. You've got your Nightmare on Elm Street stuff, because there's a lot of that type of dream imagery and scenes that are reminiscent of stuff that was done in the Nightmare on Elm Street films. And, of course, we come back to Carrie. There's a lot of Carrie influence stuff here. The film opens up with a young girl who's actually giving a confession to a priest about how much she liked doing all the sins that she did with boys and everything. She loved every minute of it. And what happens is she is with her date, and she leaves her date for another guy, and this is at the prom. And her date is going to throw some stink bomb firecrackers down on her, as kind of a revenge, I guess. In the moment, maybe he didn't really think it out. I think, but I think that the stink bombs just sort of presented themselves to him in the bathroom. Somebody left them there, and but instead, her dress catches on fire and she burns. And cut to, in the 80s when we've got a whole new generation of people getting ready for the prom, and Mary Lou's soul has possessed a young girl who's a high schooler in this film, and the guy who threw the firecracker down is now the principal, and he's played by Michael Ironside, who's always a welcome presence in any kind of horror movie. And if you haven't seen Visiting Hours, be sure to check that one out. I enjoyed this movie. It's pretty wacky. It's fun. I liked some of the kills. There's particularly one that involves a locker that was fun. On the whole, I enjoyed its spirit and its energy, and it was just. I think I liked the genre mashup of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I like that it was very different from the first one. It was an in name only sequel to the first movie, which we may be talking about later today. It's a fun movie. It really is a fun movie, and it has kind of a very subversive quality too at the same time. And that's kind of why I go back to it. And I think when I originally saw it in the 80s, I was prepared not to like it because it wasn't Jamie Lee Curtis. It wasn't, it wasn't anything like the original Prom Night. But then I noticed like a sense of humor about it. Like, oh, this is a bit of a different angle. And then on subsequent viewings, I really kind of grew to appreciate it more. For sure. I think it really is kind of out there and bonkers. And you have Michael Ironside. He has everything you want in a Canadian horror movie of the 80s. It's very Canadian.
This one I watched on Amazon Prime, so if you have that service, that's available for you to watch right now. I don't know that it's available on Blu-ray or anything like that. Do you know if it is?
It's not on Blu-ray. It's on MGM. Put it out on DVD. I don't know if it's still in print or not. I have the DVD from MGM. It looks pretty good. But yeah, I'm surprised it hasn't been released on Blu-ray, to be honest, because I know it has kind of a big cult audience. So get on it, whoever. All right. Moving on to my number 8. Here it is.
They called her the little girl who lives down the lane. All alone in that big house. Who was she? And what was her secret? A lot of people wondered. Like Mario, the local comedian.
Somebody's out there.
Officer Miglioretti, the local cop.
I don't believe what you've been telling me about your father.
You're a very pretty girl, you know that? Pretty eyes.
Frank Hallett, the local creep. And nasty Mrs. Hallett, the local gossip.
Mrs. Hallett, I'm warning you!
I want to know what's been happening here in this house. I want to know what happened here today!
I even had to ask him why the police don't do anything about it.
Why should they do anything?
When your son gives candy to pretty little girls?
Academy Award nominee Jodie Foster, Martin Sheen, Alexis Smith.
Get out of here!
The little girl who lives down the lane.
The little girl who lives down the lane might be a hard sell for horror fans because it doesn't quite feel like a horror movie in a sense, in the traditional sense. It's more of a gothic horror movie. So it's a bit slower moving. There isn't a Freddy Krueger-like character. There isn't. This is not a 90s. This is a very far removed from a 90s movie. It feels very 70s. It feels very. I wouldn't say quaint, but it feels more like a stage play put in film. But that's what I like about this movie. It really is. It taps into its characters really, really well. The dialogue and of course having a Jodie Foster at the helm, being the star of this movie, and in the 70s when she was this Disney actress turning into this darker kind of teen actress in movies like this and Taxi Driver the same year. She was definitely taking her career to the next level, and you could see that with her. She has a very complicated performance, an interesting performance, also a bad wig, but a good performance with a bad wig. And borders on being exploitive and also artful. I like that about it. I like that it has sides to it. And Scott Jacoby, who we may be talking about later, is in this movie as a friend and has a good cast. Besides Jodie Foster, Martin Sheen playing a very predatory character, to say the least. Quite disturbing in his scenes. I remember that being quite disturbing to watch when I was a kid. I saw this on VHS. I remember renting it. I remember the video being from a Vestron tape and renting it from the store. And kind of an interesting kind of drawn artwork on it of a girl who didn't quite look like Jodie Foster, and just really enjoying it. And I remember my sister and my grandmother really enjoying it. I know a lot of women who actually really like this movie. I think I've asked quite a few women about it, and they seem to gravitate towards it and remember it greatly from their childhood, which is interesting. And I included it in here because I think it's one of the better movies of that time period from the 70s to emerge. And I have a couple of picks from the 70s here. And I really seem to gravitate towards those female-driven ones, like Carrie and this, and another one coming up. They seem to speak to me and have some interesting things to say about becoming a girl, becoming a woman, more subtle than, say, Ginger Snaps, but done in an interesting way, I would say, for sure. Again, like a movie that feels like a stage play, but a film stage play, but very well done, I gotta say. And I've always liked it. How about you?
I did not see this movie until fairly recently. I think was it Olive Films, or maybe it was Kino that put it out on Blu-ray fairly, like, in the last year or so. Mm-hmm. And I got it then, and I watched it then. And I do remember when I was a little kid and being a little freaked out by the title, The Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane. It just seemed like a very portentous title, very frightening thing. And what you get is, like you said, it does feel like a stage play. It's kind of a single location. Jodie Foster is the main character. There's characters kind of coming in and out as the plot progresses. And I do like this film, and I think that it skews in terms of the characters on the younger side of the movies that we've picked. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it is about, kind of getting responsibility and becoming an adult. She's got to be, I think she's 13 in this movie, but it's definitely something that I think is a great theme for a horror film, or a teen film. Martin Sheen. That would have been a very different movie.
A very different movie, yeah.
Martin Sheen is extremely creepy and predatory, and just like as we go along, as the film progresses. And Scott Jacoby is wonderful as her friend, who's also a magician in the film, and it's a solid recommend from me.
It could have been Martin Short, because this was filmed in Canada, and Martin Short might have, for all we know, Martin Short auditioned for this movie. So we don't know. It could have happened. I would like to see that movie, though, for sure. Too. On DVD, on Blu-ray rather. You mentioned Kino Lorber put it out, a good Blu-ray release, and as the director, the novelist, talking about the movie. So it's a good release for sure. Let's get into your number 7. Here's a TV spot.
Pray for day. Hell Night. Hell Night. Linda Blair in Hell Night from Compass International. Rated R.
Okay, my number 7 movie is called Hell Night from 1981, directed by Tom DeSimone. Tom DeSimone also directed Reformed Schoolgirls and Angel 3, The Final Chapter. And apparently he's uncredited as a director, or maybe he filled in a bit on the movie Savage Streets, which is a very excellent revenge / thriller / teen horror movie starring Linda Blair. Linda Blair also stars in this one. This movie is one of the movies that has the theme, well, not the theme so much, but the setting of it is that of an initiation. You've got a group of 4 people that are being initiated into, I guess, a sorority / fraternity, and they have to spend the night in a mansion, the Garth Manor. And there is a long exposition dump at the very beginning of this movie talking about Garth Manor. And kudos to the guy who played that, because that was a very long scene for him to do. But for me, the film is appealing to me because I saw it at a young age, and it was very scary to me. And still looking back on it, I think the kills that are in this movie are pretty well done. it's pretty effective as a slasher movie. It also has a bit of, a nice kind of, I don't know, fun kind of element to it because it takes place in this giant mansion, and the mansion has all sorts of pathways and corridors and hidden floors and everything like that. And so that sort of adds to it, especially when you're watching it as a kid. All these houses that have the secret rooms and stuff like that. And this movie also had it had Peter Barton, who was also in Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter, and the TV show The Powers of Matthew Starr. And the Garth Manor is one of the characters in the film. You probably know what this building is, but I really enjoyed seeing it, and it's sort of, it's one of the characters of the movie. And there is, in this movie, the characters are being chased by what is called a gork in this movie. And
gork, of course.
The gork, yeah. And if they say gork about a dozen times in the movie, and the gork is a deformed young man who is one of the Garth family. Maybe he's misunderstood. Maybe he's a homicidal maniac. We'll have to watch the movie to find out. But I did enjoy this film, and this is definitely, out of all the films on this list, this is probably like the most one that's like a nostalgic film for me, because for a long time it wasn't really readily available. It was on DVD, I think, from Anchor Bay, which went out of print, and I think there was a DVD version of it that was a double feature with the movie Fade to Black with Dennis Christopher, and that's another favorite from the early 80s that kind of disappeared for me for a while anyway. You probably had access to these things all along, but and then it was re-released from Scream Factory a year or so ago, and it's a lot of fun. I love the kills. I love the climax of the movie. Maybe not the best performance from Linda Blair. She's done better work in some other movies, but this is a nostalgia piece for me.
Oh, I think I've talked about this movie on the podcast before. So it just really taps into, yes, my childhood, of course, watching this movie. It was a lot, I guess it was far creepier as a kid to watch this movie. Because something about the atmosphere and the setting really kind of scared me. Now I guess not so much. I just see like a bunch of frat people in a house, trying to scare each other and then getting killed off. Well, good for them. But I don't know. I still enjoy the heck out of it, for sure. I think it does a lot with that atmosphere. It's very well shot. I think Mac Ahlberg, he did a lot of like New World Pictures, a lot of great titles, did the cinematography, and utilizes a lot of that natural light. There's a lot of candles. It just feels very much, even though it was like a 1981 slasher movie, it feels like it could have been another time period, which I like. And I think the performances are good. Yeah, Linda Blair maybe isn't like outstanding, but I think she's a good final girl. I think Marnie is a pretty good final girl, actually. She really does kind of have to deal with the situation. There's some really good scares, one involving something coming up from the floor, especially. I remember that freaking me out as a kid. Linda Blair's cleavage is great. Does a great performance.
Yes.
And Seth, I think is the character's name, who's like does the Robin Hood thing. He's really good in this movie. He's a really fun character.
A Van Patten. I can't remember his first name, but yeah, I believe he's a tennis player as well later on in life.
He was the one that was married to Betsy Russell. And they had,
oh, really?
They had a kid.
Wow. Timothy Van Patten, I think.
Yeah, I think that's right. Maybe I'm mixing the Van Pattens up, but I think one of them married Betsy Russell.
Well, you know what they say about the Van Patten kids.
Oh, what's that?
8 is enough.
You set me up for that one. For sure. I don't know. It's like one of those teen slasher movies of the 80s that I just kind of really dig, and I think it sets itself apart because it is a bit classier in a way, even though it was directed by Tom DeSimone, who did Reform School Girls, and he did like hardcore porn before this. A movie about talking vagina, but it's like
did he direct the Chatterbox?
He did Chatterbox. I remember that. So yeah, he had his hand in all kinds of things, and quite literally, and then Hell Night is classy ass slasher movie with Linda Blair. Compass, I think, did Compass put this out? That's why it was paired.
Yeah, I believe it did, because I did believe I see like the Mustafa Akkad name at the very beginning.
Yes, it was that was from that crew, and that's why it was probably paired with that other movie on Blu-ray, on DVD rather, because they were both Compass movies at the time, or at least had that connection. So I had it on DVD. I had 2 copies on DVD because I was afraid that my out of print copy would break, and then I wouldn't have another one. But then thankfully it was released, like you said, on Blu-ray. So I'm glad to own it. HD. All right. I am a fan of Hell Night. Let's move on to... Actually, before we get into it, let's going to read some lists off of pals of the show. Sean Kelly wrote in his favorite teen horror movies: Scream, Carrie, and Ginger Snaps. Zachary Carey, Nightmare on Elm Street. Carrie are tops for me. I'll have to think of some others for follow-up comment. Roberto Diaz, Carrie, The Spell, Nightmare on Elm Street, Dead Girl, The Girl Next Door, Teen Wolf, Heathers, The Beast Within, Scream, and The Curse, which is a werewolf movie. And Sue Bernardi Johnson wrote in Once Bitten, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, The House on Sorority Row, Jennifer's Body, Lost Boys, April Fool's Day, Carrie, The Boy Who Cried Werewolf, 1973 version. And Willie Greer wrote in It Follows, Friday the 13th, Teeth, and Ginger Snaps. Thank you guys for writing in. I'll read off the rest a little bit later. There's definitely like movies that I have that are not on my list, like Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th, because obviously we've talked about them on the podcast before. So, okay, so like my number 7. Here it is.
So aliens have just been setting us up all for the years with their ET and our Men in Black movies, just so that nobody would believe it if it really happened.
I think so. These students are starting to suspect their teachers are from another planet.
Sit down! They're after me.
Guess what? Now we're gonna have some fun. They're right.
Aliens are taking over the school.
But we can stop it.
The Faculty.
This is weird.
Rated R. In theaters everywhere, Friday, December 25th.
The Faculty. I haven't talked about this movie. This is probably one of the newer movies on my list. I have 2 movies post 1995 on my list. How dare I? The Faculty is a movie that I liked when it came out on Christmas Day of 1998. It was a Dimension movie. It was Kevin Williamson. It was it's the guy who did Scream. It was it just feels very much of that time period, and I enjoyed it. Robert Rodriguez directed it. And then over the years, I'm like, I'd watch it once in a while. I'm like, this movie is definitely more entertaining than I remember it being. And then I rewatched it again for the podcast. I'm like, this movie is really entertaining. I really had a lot of fun watching it. So I had to include it here. It just kind of hits all those like 90s tropes pretty well. It has like that Dawson's Creek kind of like dialogue, which may be grating. It was kind of grating on me a little bit in H2O, but here it kind of works because it is kind of a silly premise. Of course, it is like the invasion of the body snatchers meets Scream, but it works. It's like it's all those fears and anxieties you have in high school kind of multiplied and exaggerated, and it has the characters who kind of fit into all these kind of cliches. It's very much The Breakfast Club as a template for this movie. where it's like these 5 characters plus someone else, and they fit into those molds, but also kind of break out of them a bit too, which is kind of interesting and fun. A lot of fun actors playing these roles. I liked it. I think it really kind of hits up some fun 90s buttons in that post-Scream era that I enjoy. There's quite a few of those that I do actually enjoy and go back to. And you would think I'd be a snob about some of them, but I'm not, because I think they were entertaining, and I think they definitely fulfilled a need at the time to make those kinds of movies because of the success of Scream. And when horror was feeling a little bit barren, so they were making kind of these fun little movies. And they're not really quite little because they seem kind of big at the time. Some of them did better than others. This one, I think, did $40 million at the box office, so it did pretty well. Surprised it didn't do even more, because it's very entertaining. But I think maybe because it was rated R again, hard for teens at this time period to get into the R-rated movies. So, Faculty, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts. I did see Faculty, I think, when it came out on DVD. Back after its initial theatrical release, and I enjoyed it. I liked the cast. It's got a huge cast, wonderful actors in it. Haven't really given it much consideration since. And at the time with this 90s set of horror movies, I definitely liked movies like Scream. I loved Scream at the time, and here since then, recently, like in the past 10 years or so, they just haven't been things that I've been really revisiting. Mm-hmm. And I know that it has a revival, and a lot of these films, are like you said with The Faculty, are getting kind of another glance, another look at them. And I know that there's a new book out called The 90s Horror Movie Cycle that looks at a lot of these films, like The Faculty.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And some of these other films. And I considered doing some of these for the films that I'm doing for this one, but I didn't really know where to start. I was like, should I do I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, or I Know What You Did Last Summer? Should I go back to Scream? I was like, Scream, yeah, I'm sure you've talked about it. And so I kind of stayed away from it because it's not really I wouldn't say area of expertise, but I don't really remember a whole lot of them very well. But I do remember liking this one. But yeah, so that's a long way of saying I liked it at the time.
Yeah. I think you should give it a shot. I think it's on Blu-ray. And I think if you just enjoy it as a movie, as a straight up whatever, entertaining movie, Robert Rodriguez, he's a fun director. He doesn't always make like the best movies, but he does know how to put together kind of a fun movie. Kind of the way I look at it. It just feels like it's just kind of like a fun, like if I were like a teenager in the 80s and I was thinking about like my school being taken over by aliens, this is the kind of like scenario I would conjure up in my head. I think it has some CGI that maybe is a little bit maybe not so great, but it was of its time. It's a 20-year-old movie now, so can't really fault it for that. But I don't know, I enjoy it. I really do enjoy it every time I watch it. So I think I'm always surprised that I enjoy it as much as I do, considering it was a movie of its time.
Mm-hmm.
That was The Faculty. I know it was a strange recommend, but I do enjoy it. I do like it. What is your number 6, David?
They are brother and sister alone.
Vance and Mac and Mom are dead.
Killed in a car crash.
On their own. Without parents. Without friends. Trying to make it in a new town.
Something bothering you, cousin? No. Nothing ever bothers me.
Yeah! Facing a dangerous new enemy.
Yeah, I can get it.
Says who?
That's me and $50.
A gang that will stop at nothing to add one new word to their lives. Terror.
You think we ought to light ourselves a little fire?
You want crazy? Well, I'll show you crazy.
director of the original Friday the 13th, comes a new ticket to terror. Striking Back.
You want crazy? Well, I'll show you crazy.
My number 6 film is, whenever we first started talking about doing this episode, I said I'd like to talk about this movie. And we kind of got to this point. And it was kind of funny that we're at this point doing teen horror, because this movie is not, I would say, strictly a horror movie. The movie is called The New Kids. It's from 1985, directed by Sean S. Cunningham. And it mixes a few genres together. It has it has some horror elements to it, and it has, I think the main element is probably thriller, some coming of age stuff going on in there too, but mainly a thriller scenario. And at the beginning, like I was saying, with the mix of the genres, at the very beginning, it's about these teenage boy and girl, brother and sister, who their parents die in a car accident a few minutes into the film. But at the very beginning, the dad, who was a military man, Tom Atkins, he wakes them up at the very beginning, and they go for a run. And there's this very rousing 80s song that could have, it could have gone in The Karate Kid, Mm-hmm. And we hear this song, over the course of the movie 3 times, at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end of at the end of the credits. And it's a mix of things that can only have really been pulled off with some genuine flavor in the 80s. Sean S. Cunningham, of course, directed Friday the 13th. This movie, for me, I do really like this movie, and I have it at number 6 on the list, kind of because it's not entirely a horror movie. I think that there's this one scene. Well, let me get to the plot a little bit. So the brother and sister, their parents die, and they have to move and live with their uncle, who lives in Florida, who is this dreamer character who is kind of doing this do-it-yourself amusement park called Santa's Playland, I believe. And so they're helping him, and he is also, he could use a little bit of money here and there, and so the brother gives him, the money that they've inherited for a generator to kind of let their uncle fulfill his dream. But at the same time, there's something else going on, and that's at the school where the main character, Lori Loughlin, is being harassed in a very menacing way by some of the local creeps. Including James Spader, and he's in this film. I don't know where this is in terms of some of the other 80s films that he did. I'm sure it's before most of them, but he's very menacing in this movie, and to me, that's kind of like his scenes with her, all missing in this movie. It's such a good performance. It's a kind of a slightly over the top performance too, but he's got. He's frequently in these Western shirts. He's got these bleach blonde eyebrows, which somehow make him even more creepy. So there's that, and there's this other scene involving blood and a dog that's maybe going to try and attack someone that's got the blood on it. And also there's this coda at the very end of the movie, which makes me kind of, say, oh, this is okay to sort of, talk about on an episode where we're talking about teen horror, where it's one of those things where you think it's over, but it's probably not really over, something that you see in so many horror movies. And that's, kind of what makes the horror genre so much. Part of what makes the horror genre so much fun is that little coda at the end, and you see that here. So definitely a mix of genres, but I'm sneaking it in. What are your thoughts?
This is an interesting one because I think a lot of people, when they saw that poster, that really good poster for this movie, mm-hmm. and Sean Cunningham, they really played it up like this really scary, creepy horror movie. And then when the ads started coming in for it, I'm like, this doesn't seem like a horror movie at all. So they kind of stayed away. It didn't do very well at all at the box office. But ironically, it actually is a horror movie because it goes pretty far. It feels very kind of menacing, and because James Spader is so scary in this movie, it does feel like a really scary kind of horror movie in a way. And it's like a creepy amusement park at night, and like turning an amusement park against your attackers is an incredible idea. I'm kind of obsessed with this movie. I'm just gonna say that right now. One, this is the movie I saw as a kid and made me scared of Florida as a state. I'm like, wow, this is what people in Florida are like beyond like Disney World. And it's kind of been proven to be like some kind of really fucked up things come out of Florida. So this is not exaggerated.
Florida man.
These teenagers are like, like they're shooting guns like at each other's feet. They're like training, dogs to attack. Like, this stuff actually happens in Florida. And yeah, they're seriously picking on these two kids who are for somewhere else, and they just happen to be kids who are trying to grieve over their dead parents. That scene in the beginning, I can do a whole podcast on this movie, by the way. That scene in the beginning where Tom Atkins riles them up out of bed is kind of hysterical if you rewatch it. The things he says to them, like he's like, "Get up out of bed," or he's like, I don't know what he says exactly, but he's like, "Oh, you jacking off all night or something" to the son. And then like he says something really inappropriate to his daughter, like
he says something about her sexy ass or something like that.
Get your sexy body out of bed. Like, what is Tom Atkins saying to his children? This is not something I would even dream to say to my kid. Like, it's so strange and bizarre. And then, he doesn't make it too far into the movie. I'm like, oh man, I wish Tom Atkins would just show up and like say something really appropriate again, because that was amazing. That great sequence of them exercising and working out, and of course that's going to play a part in the final act. Although you'd think it would play a bit more of a part, it doesn't quite. I don't remember karate skills happening for Lori Loughlin. I think she's not given as much to do in the final act as her brother, but she does defend herself too at the same time. She's definitely victimized a lot in this movie, and beat up, punched around, thrown around. It's quite upsetting, but her hair always stays kind of perfect in a Lori Loughlin way. Her hair is like, I think if you try to take a blowtorch to Lori Loughlin's hair, it would still stay kind of that way. They're kind of poofy in the front and beautiful and long and gorgeous. Her hair's amazing and a character in itself, I would say. Oh God, James Spader in this movie, like, hello, Creepyville. He's definitely committed to playing this character. He's almost albino-esque with that bleach blonde hair and eyebrows. So creepy from the moment you meet him. Like, this guy is not charming at all, and he tries to pick her up, and then like doesn't understand why she's not into him. Like, what? He's completely demented from the very beginning, and these guys take it further and further with each scene, and then these kids are like they're in a really fucked up situation, because they're kind of forced to live with these relatives who then kind of proceed to take advantage of them and take their money, the only money that they have to fix up this shitty amusement park in Florida. This Santa themed amusement park in Florida seems like a really bad idea, and yet the brother gives the guy the money to pay for this stuff. When it reaches a climax and the kids have an option of staying there, I'm like, really? You're gonna do that? Why don't you just go back to that military family that wants to take you in? But my wife pointed out, I don't think living with a military dad is what they really want at this point in their life. And I'm like, yeah, probably not, because they're pretty rigid, and at this point they're pretty much doing whatever they want, or could do whatever they want, but obviously need to live in an amusement park. But as you do in life, I kind of imagine myself in that scenario, and like living in an amusement park, and what would happen if the typical creepo from Florida would try to infiltrate my life, how would I react? I would definitely have to learn karate. I would definitely need to learn how to make a roller coaster chop off somebody's head. I might have to set someone ablaze. There's lots of fun dispatching of people in this movie, and definitely like the idea of taking a Ferris wheel and using that against someone. That's pretty great. There's some really good stuff in this movie. It's a whole lot of good stuff. Sean Cunningham, thank you so much for making this movie. It's pure genius and exploitation at the same time.
I think that, and, it was written by Stephen Gyllenhaal, who'd done a lot of directing as well.
Yep.
What you said before about this taking it really far with some of the stuff that goes on, kind of lends itself to me just sort of putting in the horror genre a little bit, like the stuff at the end, the climax of the film, which does take place at Santa's playground, Santa's Playland. It's so much fun. That's such a fun setting, and it's such a perfect setting for a horror movie too. Even though Santa's Playground is probably less fun of an actual amusement park to go to on its own, it's an effective setting for a set piece for a finale for this film.
When I saw The Strangers too, and like it was essentially people running around like I guess mobile homes, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I'm like, this would be so much better if it was like the New Kids and it was an amusement park. Like, that's what I really wanted out of that movie. Like, I basically hold the New Kids up as like, if you just end your movie in an amusement park and have like a scene there, like a big battle in an amusement park, like the New Kids, that your movie would be so much better. Basically, I want every movie to be the New Kids, pretty much.
Yeah, perfect set piece there.
I love it so much. Thank you for including it. That'd probably be my number one. I love it. All right. We're getting in there. That was your number 6. What is my number 6? Oh, here it is. Here's a TV spot.
It was an accident.
There it is.
They barely escaped.
The drives are broken. Don't push the button.
The ones who got off that roller coaster are still going to die.
It's become a destination.
You're reading into this like them urban legends.
They can't avoid.
I never thought I could see my own death before it happened. You're dead!
Final Destination 3.
Meet you at the end.
Rated R. Starts Friday, February 10th.
Okay, Final Destination 3. I wanted to include a Final Destination movie here because it's such a fun series of movies that really tap into like what the 2000s were lacking. Like they didn't really have that kind of body count movie. Like I really missed all the fun body count movies of the 80s, and really the 90s kind of missed them too. But the 2000s, you had the Final Destination series, which became a return to the body count movie, essentially. And just a bunch of people dying off in really fun and inventive ways. I like the first one. The second one was probably my favorite of the series because it has such a great opening sequence. I picked the third one here because that was like more of a true teen horror movie, where 4 and 5 and 2 don't. They're teenish, but not as much as 3. Also, 3 has Mary Elizabeth Winstead as a teenager in the lead. She's definitely the best of the final girls in these movies. And it has a really fun set piece on a roller coaster, another amusement park. And I guess I really like that setting a lot in movies. And it has that set piece, and then it sets up like a bunch of fun, creative deaths, including a tanning bed sequence that uses a really fun song, Roller Coaster of Love. Gosh, a lot of the deaths in this movie, a lot of the set pieces really stick out in my head. I think who was it? Not James Wan, but did a really good job. He did the first one and then came back for the third one, and I think they just kind of improve upon their formula. and just kind of more direct about it. At this point, number 3, you don't need to like set it up as much. There's some setting up in this movie, but it doesn't like the first half of like Final Destination 1 is kind of a setup, really. This, you kind of get to it a lot quicker. The set pieces are pretty fun. They're back to back, and it feels like a lot of like people getting killed off. And I don't know, it just feels like a kind of a roller coaster of a movie. And I like all the set pieces for sure. I like that there's ones in a kind of a Home Depot like place. Lots of things to mine in this one for horror and especially for teen horror. I really enjoy it. How about you?
Did I say James Hong before? I think I meant to say James Wong.
I'm
not sure. James Wong.
Totally.
James Hong from, Big Trouble in Little China and countless other movies. James Wong, director of this film. Or maybe it was Martin Short. I'm really not sure.
Martin Short is, director of this film.
This film, I'm a fan of the first few Final Destination. Well, let's just say more specifically, I really like Final Destination 2. I think it really improved upon the first one, which I did like. And Final Destination 3 comes out, and I saw it when it came out, I think on video. And I think maybe my expectations were for something which had that kind of bravura opening car crash scene, which I love so much in the second one. Which still, is very imprinted on my brain. And this one, to me, it definitely had some fun moments, and it's one that I recall the tanning bed one. I don't recall Mary Elizabeth Winstead's performance so much in that film, having just, probably hadn't really seen her before. And since then, she's become a wonderful actress, which probably was in that film. I just don't remember. She's terrific. So I definitely would like to go back to this one and see it again. And of course, I love the roller coasters, and that's a perfect setting. But it's one that when I saw it, I was like, not quite as good as 2, and so I sort of dismissed it. But it sounds like I should give that one another shot too.
I think for me, the series as a whole holds up really well. I like all of them in different ways. I think the fourth one maybe is the least one for me, but because that was the one that was in 3D when it came out, so maybe it kind of lost a little bit in translation after the 3D aspect in theaters. 5 was a good way to send off the series. I guess that's what happened. I really think they could have continued with it. I've even had some ideas for like a 6th one in my mind. There's definitely a lot of things to mine. I'm sure there'll be an inevitable reboot of the series, considering that's what everyone does now, reboot everything. But I really think it's a fun series of movies, and I definitely go back to 3 for some reason the most these days, because it has that fun teen element. I think that's probably what it is. All right, so I'm going to read off a few more lists. Let's see. Leo Logan wrote in Scream, The Craft, The Lost Boys, The Faculty, I Know What You Did Last Summer, Disturbing Behavior, Brain Scan, and Deadly Friend. Barf Jackson wrote in The Gate. And Edmund Nova wrote in Evil Dead. And Warren Buddy, The Lost Boys. And David Felter wrote in Night of the Creeps. Sue Shippers, Nightmare on Elm Street 1 through 4, of course. Scream, Urban Legend, Disturbing Behavior, The Final Girls, Night of the Comet, The Blob, I Know What You Did Last Summer, Sleepwalkers, and Halloween. Runners-up go to Final Destination and Cabin in the Woods. Thank you, guys. And now let's get into our top 5s. Here's yours.
5 years ago, the Lutz family fled their home in Amityville, New York. They were lucky to escape with their lives. But the previous owners, the Montellis, weren't so lucky. They were caught by the original evil that possessed the house, an evil that drove their son to destroy everything and everyone he loved. Now, Amityville 2, The Possession, rated R.
Starts tomorrow, AFCO, Westwood, Paramount, Hollywood, and selected theaters.
Okay, my 5th film on the teen horror list is a very strange one. It's called Amityville 2: The Possession. It's a 1982 film directed by Damiano Damiani, who also directed the spaghetti western A Bullet for the General. Movie stars Burt Young as the dad in this family. This family buys the house, which you later see, or you previously saw, because this is a prequel to the Amityville Horror. And it's kind of like the American dream, owning your own home and a beautiful house. And it lasts that way in this movie for about 45 seconds. And then for the rest of the movie, it is unrelentingly going for an unpleasant kind of sick stuff going on with this movie. It also has Diane Franklin in it, and she's in an early role. This movie throws a lot at you, and I don't love this movie so much. It's actually kind of one of those ones that I've seen a lot, but I'm kind of drawn to again and again, and I'm not sure if I really like it. but I think I do like the movie, but it's a nasty movie. It's got so much going on in this movie that's just really trying to. It's taking basically what it's doing is taking the true story of the DeFeo family, who they were murdered in the house, and just really running with it. You've got demonic possession, you've got incest, you've got abuse. If you've read up on the family, I couldn't really say how much of that was true with the family, but I doubt some of the stuff that happens in this one is true. It's a fictionalized version for sure. They changed the last name, they changed the names of the film, but you know what it's about. One of the disturbing things in this movie is it's about a brother and sister. One of the very disturbing things in this movie is that the brother is taken over by a demon, and the brother and sister have this relationship, this very loving kind of palsy relationship. They really kind of play off each other very well in terms of their conversations and stuff, and you kind of get the sense, and although a lot of this stuff is not really developed very well because there's a lot going on through the film, but it seems like the brother and sister kind of use each other as their own support systems, or as each other's support system, because the dad in the film is very abusive, and it's this everyday abuse that just it happens all the time. Like when strange stuff happens in the house, his like a mirror breaks or something like that. His reaction is to hit the kids that are nearest to the mirror, assuming that they did it. And so I think that's kind of what makes the horror of this movie, the teenage horror of this, kind of like really sad, is that these kids are very isolated, or at least they seem to be. The mom, she does not, like what's going on, but she really only threatens to leave when the dad embarrasses himself in front of the priest. So you got this kind of cauldron of abuse happening at the same time as demonic possession, as a murder of a family, which was true, which really happened, and then it goes off on another kind of subplot after that. But for me, like, the main part is the relationship between the brother and the sister, and how that gets affected and crushed by the demonic possession. It's a deeply unpleasant movie, but it's also a kind of a curiosity to me that I do come back to, and I do like it at this point. But man, it does make you feel like you need to take a shower after it's over.
For sure. Like, I'm a huge fan of the first movie. It's one of my, I would say, personal 5 favorite horror movies of all time. So getting into the sequel, this takes a different turn for sure. It gets very sleazy, and feels very Euro horror in that regard. Because it's a European director, it kind of feels very Euro horror, maybe. I don't know. I'm not sure if I like this movie or not. I like the actors, and I want to get into the story of the siblings and everything, but then it gets very sleazy with that. So I'm not sure what characters you can kind of relate to, like the priest maybe, but then I don't know. It doesn't really do it for me like say the first one or even the third movie, which I actually like the third movie too, which has Lori Loughlin in her hair. So when I watched the second one, I think I watched the second one a lot less than the first and the third movie. So anytime I do rewatch it, I'm like, oh my god, this is happening, like, that's happening, and then the inevitable like slaughter of everybody. If you're basing it on the original story, you kind of know what's gonna happen. Just really brings me down, man.
It's an ugly movie for sure.
Yeah, but I like your thoughts on the sister and the brother and how they're a support system for each other. I didn't quite pick that up as much because maybe I'm too focused on the nastier and sleazier elements of the movie, but that's pretty insightful and interesting, and I think there's probably a good movie in there. I'm just kind of ignoring it based on like some of the other things that happen in the movie for sure.
Yeah, like in pulling up a list like this, you're kind of like in a way in your head you're kind of ticking off some boxes, and this one definitely feels to me like, even though your lead, probably your top billed person is Burt Young, the dad. He's not in all the film. Spoiler alert. But to me, the core of the movie is the relationship between the teenage boy and girl. So for that reason, it sort of sticks. But yeah, and I wouldn't say it's a favorite movie of mine. And then the next movies on the list are definitely movies that I love. But this one I have a kind of like a curious relationship with. I would have loved to have been old enough to understand the movie and see it in the theater when it first came out, and just to see reactions of people because of the extremities that it goes to. I did see this far too young.
Yeah,
on
same
cable.
Here.
Yeah,
I saw way too young.
And it was definitely a traumatizing movie to me, just in terms of like just seeing the stuff that happened. It was kind of an extreme movie then, and it still is pretty extreme.
And I know it has a lot of fans. Maybe because it has that value to it. It's definitely something a little bit out there for the series for sure. All right, here's my number 5. We actually briefly mentioned this movie earlier. Here it is.
They've taken over your school. They've taken over the streets. There's nowhere to run. Nowhere to hide. When violence rules the night, she brings justice her way. Linda Blair stars in Savage Streets. Rated R.
Savage Streets, now playing at a theater near you.
Yes, Savage Streets. I went with Savage Streets, which I guess could be also labeled as like a revenge movie, because it does really feel like a teen horror movie to me, because what happens in the movie is pretty horrific. Rape revenge movies are horrors for real. And Linda Blair giving a very good performance here as this leader of a girl group gang, if you want to call it that, in LA, and her sister, her mute deaf sister, violently attacked by a gang of gross men who are students, sort of. Well, a couple of them are students.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, they don't look some of them way too old to be students, obviously. And they attack Linnea Quigley, her sister, and rape her, and she needs to make a choice. She needs to make a stand and find out who did this to her and get revenge the way she knows how. And she's an intelligent character. She's someone who gets into trouble a lot. It seems girls seem to want to pick on her. Yeah, she's Linda Blair. I think she might have had similar troubles in her own life, where women might have been jealous of certain aspects of certain things about her, and yeah, you would get bullied by certain people because of that. I don't know. I find her character compelling. I find the story, even though it goes to some pretty dark places, compelling. And then the inevitable showdown, much like the New Kids, it pays off greatly what it sets up. And I like a good movie that does that. I mean, these teen movies, I would say the New Kids, Class of 1984, do that so well. I mean, they go to these pretty dark and crazy places, but they remain entertaining, and then just like pay it off really well with the revenge aspect. And I love that about those kinds of movies. And Linda Blair at the head of it makes it even more perfect for me. I saw this in a theater when I was a kid. And
wow.
I saw it at the RKO Warner Twin in Times Square. I remember seeing The Wildlife at that theater. I think it was like kind of like a double feature, maybe. What an interesting double feature of teens, for sure. And then I remember after The Wildlife left the theater, the following week, Ninja 3: The Domination showed up. Pair along with Savage Streets. That's quite
that's a great double feature there.
Quite a double. I had a lot of fun seeing a lot of movies. It was like the mid 80s, and you were still getting a lot of good exploitation movies like this one, and I think the same week that Perils of Gwendolyn came out, I saw that in the theater. So it was like a fun time to be a kid and watching crazy movies, for sure, for me. And seeing this movie, I really just kind of stuck with me. And we rented it a lot on VHS. Vestron put it out on VHS, so we had a lot of replay value in our house, for sure. How about you?
I saw this movie for the first time on video. This was several years back. I don't know, maybe 10 years back. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I do here in Tulsa is program an all-night or co-program an all-night series of movies that we do every year, a slumber party. They're usually themed. Mm-hmm. And this particular year we were doing revenge movies. And awesome. So this one was on the list. And so my programmer at the time, who has since moved on to Los Angeles and then has moved kind of back here, I believe, he and I watched this one, and we both agreed that this one definitely deserved a spot. And we got a 35 millimeter print, so that was a lot of fun.
Nice.
Yeah. And so we played this one at about 2 a.m. and had a lot of people loving this one the most of the slate of movies that year. And that movie year included Rolling Thunder,
nice.
Which we talked about briefly a little bit ago. And this is a really good. Love this movie. Don't want to just start off by saying it's really good. I do love this movie. Exploitation picture. It's really good at balancing its harrowing stuff with some humor and another rousing pop song in this movie, mm-hmm. and a nice montage as well. The movie has John Vernon, who's always a welcome presence, who probably most famously is the principal in Animal House. Mm-hmm. And this is the movie where he says, "Go fuck an iceberg," isn't it?
As all principals do in high school. That's what they say.
That's one of the best lines you could ever hear from a principal. Mm-hmm. This is definitely one that would really rile a crowd and get people going. And it's down on Hollywood Boulevard. It ticks a lot of boxes for me as well. And it's got Linda Blair doing, a very fine performance in this one. and it's just a lot of fun. Directed by Danny Steinman, who also did Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning, which is definitely the sleaziest of all the Friday the 13th movies. Yeah, love this movie.
Do you know the original director of this movie?
Of this particular movie?
Yeah.
No, I don't.
It's Tom DeSimone.
That's why.
Who did Hell Night, yeah.
Okay. So they moved from one sleazy director to another sleazy director.
Although Tom DeSimone did have Hell Night. He got classy there for a little while.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a sleazy picture. But I guess in a way that's entertaining, though. I mean, it doesn't really... yes, the rape scene is definitely harrowing. But because there's going to be a great revenge aspect to this movie and some great one-liners as well, said by Linda Blair.
Yes.
You just know you're going to be in for some fun. And that great theme song... which comes up over the scene where Linda Blair is in the bathtub naked and she's like staring out, plotting her revenge. Like, what a perfect moment for so many reasons. So great. This movie's so much fun, and and also dark and sleazy too at the same time.
New Blu-ray release, I believe.
New Blu-ray release. I just picked it up. It looks really good. I watched it for this podcast, and I just found myself getting really into it again. And I've always been into this movie. I've had the VHS copy. I've had it on. I have 2 different DVD versions of it that have extras on it. Now the Blu-ray, which I think combines the extras. And it's good to see Linda Blair on there and her interview, and it looks great. I mean, I've noticed things in this Blu-ray release that I never noticed before, so I got to pick out. There's a lot more detail in it, so I get to see the name of the ice cream place that they go to, and Hollywood Boulevard looking pretty sleazy in the background, and I just noticed more things on this Blu-ray release, so it's definitely worth picking up that Blu-ray for sure. Looks great. So I've always been a fan of this one.
Yeah, a theater in LA, which is no longer operating. I believe it was this one. They did a triple feature a few years ago. I actually had an idea for a double feature, which is similar to this one, but they did. I think they called it Hollywood Sleaze, and they did a triple feature of this movie, and they did Angel, and they did Vice Squad, which to me that is a wonderful, wonderful lineup right there. I think my idea was not this movie, but the other two, Angel and Vice Squad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, perfect genre night there. Those movies are they go so well together. If you got the stomach and you got the patience.
I know that's a lot. that's a lot of movie, but that sounds pretty amazing at the same time. I would be down for that. All right, let's get into your number 4.
So shocking, so terrifying, so powerful. Night Warning has been named Best Horror Film of the Year by the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror. Billy and Julie, young, innocent, in love. It was all a mistake. They didn't go looking for trouble. They were just too curious. Without knowing, they've uncovered a deadly secret. By accident, they've stumbled onto a grisly murder. Now, they know too much to live. A chilling tale of a young boy and girl, innocent victims, now targets of a frenzied obsession with murder. See the award-winning Night Warning.
Okay, well, the last movie you were talking about having the new Blu-ray of it. I have an older Blu-ray of Savage Streets from Code Red, and this movie I have on DVD, although they put out a Blu-ray of it from Code Red as well, and it is called Night Warning, a.k.a. Butcher Baker Nightmare Maker. It is a movie directed by William Asher, who mostly did TV, not so many movies. He did several years on the Elizabeth Montgomery show Bewitched, and he also directed the movie Beach Blanket Bingo. So these, if you've seen this movie,
total primer for this movie.
Yeah, he cut his teeth and got ready for this one on Bewitched. This movie is just kind of, I don't know what to say about this, how to start. This movie is just jaw-droppingly nuts.
Mm-hmm.
The main thing about this movie is the completely unhinged performance by Susan Terrell. It's the main appeal of it for me, but there's a lot more going on in this movie that is so much to take in, so much to unpack. She plays Aunt Cheryl in this movie, and I guess the very bare bones description of this movie is that Aunt Cheryl's nephew, he might have a different relationship with her that's to be revealed later. His name is Billy. He's ending his years in high school. He is becoming a senior, and he's going to start, he's starting to have a girlfriend. He's starting to look at getting a scholarship to a basketball scholarship to a different college in a different town. And this is all very threatening to Aunt Cheryl. And that's just putting it mildly, very mildly. Mm-hmm. This movie co-stars Jimmy McNichol as Billy. The movie has a murder subplot or a homicide subplot, and Bo Svensson comes in as the detective, and he is just over the top in his homophobia in this movie. And it also features Bill Paxton in a very early role, and he's got that Bill Paxton, quality, that star quality. You can see it in his very few scenes that he has in this movie. But I just love this movie. This is another one that we played at our slumber party. This was actually at our first slumber party. We had a 35 millimeter print of it, and we had seen all the other films that year, but we hadn't seen this particular one. So I think my co-programmer was looking for some advice and reached out to the Alamo Drafthouse, and they had a 35 millimeter print of this, and they recommended it. So we put it on sight unseen, and it again spooled at 2:00 in the morning. And this one, we've done this thing 9 years now, 9 different ones, and this one was definitely the highlight of that particular fourth slot of the night, which is the hardest slot to do because people are definitely ready for sleep at this point. It's the hardest movie to program in a series of 5 that ends up at 6 in the morning or whatever. But everyone loved this movie. Some little bits to tell you about in this movie. I don't want to give too much of it away. It is another one of those ones where it sort of treads the line between horror and some other things, thriller, some melodrama, and maybe even some maybe some comedy. I'm not exactly sure. How I would like to have been on the set to this to see like how they got some of the performances out of the actors, and if they were going for that comic tone, and some of it they obviously are, but I mean it's a very funny movie. A couple of examples of some lines from the movie. Billy's talking about getting a scholarship to go to the Denver University, I think it was, where his girlfriend is going to be going next year, and his aunt Susan Terrell says, "College is for rich kids and people with brains. You wouldn't fit in there." So it's one of those themes that we've sort of seen. I don't know if we talked about it too much, but one of the themes that we've kind of looked at and going over a lot of these movies is parents who are not ready for their kids to become adults and go off on their own. But this just takes it to the extreme, and then like light years beyond the extreme. There's another scene where Aunt Cheryl walks in on Billy and his girlfriend having sex, and then in the next scene, Billy is getting in the shower, and he's fully naked, getting in the shower, and his Aunt Cheryl comes in, walks in on him in the bathroom, and she tells Billy, "I want you to promise me you'll never do that again," referring to him having sex, I guess. So I don't know. I guess he's not going to ever do that again. But yeah, there's so much going on. It's just kind of a gonzo nutso bonkers movie that definitely is best seen in a big crowd of people who've never seen it before or are ready for its peculiar delights. Maybe a Mother's Day movie. I don't know.
I think you're right with the Mother's Day movie. See with your favorite aunt. I don't know. It's Susan Tyrrell is this movie. She's so nuts. And in a lot of movies, I feel like she's definitely cultivated an interesting screen persona over the years. And but yeah, this performance is go for broke, crazy performance. She is just nuts. What can you say about her? But she's compellingly nuts. She was always fun to watch in movies, like when she popped up in like Angel and a few other things. But she was great in Fat City, that John Huston movie from the 70s. She was really good in that. But here she's just like, yeah, like there's no one quite like her, and then you just kind of feel bad for this kid. Who's definitely going through something. You kind of want to say that he's going through some sort of crisis with his sexuality, because he really does come across like that's what's actually happening. But then on top of it, you have this very homophobic sheriff, like you mentioned, and a girlfriend who doesn't quite understand him, and all this pressure put on him by all these outside forces, and then of course this murders that are happening. It's a very interesting slasher movie that poses some interesting ideas while also being like, pandering and sleazy and all that stuff. But that's what I like about it. It's really kind of quite unique and quite of its own thing. At the height of like when slasher movies were popular. So I don't know what people thought of it back then. What is this thing? Why is this being marketed to me as a fan of Friday the 13th? Just not quite, I guess it's similar in the sense that there is a mom character or maternal character who will do anything for her child. But that's where it stops because it becomes completely fucking nuts.
Yeah, I think that's reflected in the marketing of the movie with the multiple titles and all. Like they didn't know exactly how to sell this movie. But man, it certainly, if you're in the right mind for it, it's really wonderful.
It played recently, actually, on 35 millimeter at the Alamo Draft House. I want to say in Brooklyn, but I didn't get a chance to go see it. So. Unfortunate. I have the DVD. I haven't upgraded to the Blu-ray yet, but I should.
Yeah, same here.
Quite a movie. Nothing quite like it. All right. Here is my number 4.
Jennifer is shy.
You need a friend, Jennifer.
I can handle it.
But please, don't make her angry.
I really don't think you belong here, Jennifer. And I'm personally going to see to your departure.
For if you do, you're going to die. Because Jennifer has the power. And she's a holy terror. Jennifer, rated PG.
Now, I didn't pick Carrie because I talked about Carrie, but I picked Jennifer. Jennifer is the ripoff of Carrie, made by American International Pictures. That's really what it was made, to kind of rip off of Carrie. But I don't know. I really dig this one. It's like the disco version of Carrie, where it says, a school where a girl's being picked on by a really bitchy girl. Man, that girl's really, really not nice. She kind of outdoes Nancy Allen in Carrie a bit. She's just so mean, and as a lot of people with money are, and she just kind of picks on this poor girl and makes her life hell. And then, of course, there's going to be the inevitable showdown where she's pushed too far, and then she has to unleash her power. And quite a power she has. Jennifer has a theme song. Jennifer has snakes galore. It has spiders. It has it has Bert Convy.
Bert Convy, yeah.
with his perfect hair. It has, like I said, disco. It has scenes of disco. It has lots of scenes of parking garages and like racing around parking garages and a bitchy girl who wears a turban a lot. An inexplicable turban as a costume choice for a bad bitchy girl. I don't know. There's so many elements in this movie that I like so much. I like that she's like religious and redhead and just kind of like will always be the outsider at this posh girls' school. She just doesn't fit in. Will never fit in, but she tries her best, and these girls are not gonna let her have it. I like that there's other characters who are kind of just also repressed in their ways, and this movie kind of explores some of that. It's a fun movie, I gotta say. It really is entertaining because is going to be that inevitable fun showdown, and people will get their comeuppance for sure. And there might be a giant snake involved in it. If you're in the mood for a giant snake in a movie with some pretty cheap effects, definitely see this movie. I've always been a fan of it. I've had the VHS. The VHS was a Vestron tape that promises like lions and like all these other animals that she summons, but she doesn't actually summon. It's just really a lot of snakes, guys. But she uses those snakes well. Lisa Pelican is pretty good in this movie as the lead too. She gives a good performance. What are your thoughts on Jennifer?
Well, I'm so glad that you put this on this list because I have not seen this movie, or had not seen this movie until very recently in preparing for this. And boy, it is an entertaining movie. All the things that you mentioned, Bert Convy's perfect hair, the disco stuff at the beginning, the theme song, the bully in this movie, the girl in this movie, you were right. She is worse than Nancy Allen in Carrie, and she's definitely the worst bully. And there are a lot of bullies on this list. She's definitely the worst on either of our lists this time. She's pretty awful, and it all stems from kind of a sense of superiority because they have money, and her dad is a congressman, and Jennifer is like the one kid there that's on a scholarship. Mm-hmm. So she's not only picked on by the clique that Sandra, I believe, is the name of the girl that is the bully in this movie, mm-hmm. but also by the headmistress of the movie, mm-hmm. who makes it very clear and very plain, whose side she's on, and right. she's on the side of the people with money. I think that the movie, more than any of the movies, it is truly a Carrie ripoff. It's beat for beat Carrie. And it's also got a lot of stuff in it. I was looking at the movie, and it's a PG-rated movie, but there's a lot of content in there that would make you very much think it was an R-rated movie. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about how that movie and the movie Grizzly are probably two of the most shocking to me that they're PG-rated movies. Mm-hmm. And it's funny that they're both beat-for-beat rip-offs of... classic movies that are done by great directors. Grizzly being a beat for beat Jaws ripoff with a grizzly bear, and this one I do like it so much. I definitely want to put this one in my collection very soon. I borrowed a copy of the Blu-ray to watch it here, mm-hmm. and I think I pretty much covered it, but yeah, it's so much fun. I definitely recommend this movie.
Yeah, it has a lot of, texture to it that makes it a little bit, even though it's ripping off of Carrie, but then it kind of feels like it's becoming its own thing as well, because it is, it veers more towards the religious and the snakes and all that imagery, and it's not quite, as polished, anywhere near as polished as obviously Brian De Palma's masterpiece, Carrie, but it has its own charm and spunk and personality too. That's what I like about it. And what does it end on, a freeze frame? I mean, it has so many kind of very 70s kind of qualities that I like in teen horror movies. Lisa is just a fun enough character. I mean, Jennifer is a fun character because she's someone you kind of feel bad for her, but then you're also siding with too, Carrie, I always feel really, really bad for Carrie at the end of the movie. This kind of almost corrects Carrie's end a little bit. It definitely ends on a more positive note than Carrie, which I kind of like. So it's a good compliment to that movie in a way. I get something that Carrie didn't give me at the end. It gave me that scare for sure at the end and on the initial viewing, but it also left me a little bit sad. This one's a little bit more upbeat. Rip-offs can do that. Okay, before we get into our next ones, I'm going to take a break. Let's take a break and be back right after this.
See your body move. Your eyes have got the rhythm and your feet are in the groove. I just move a little closer. I feel you moving right. There's nothing more exciting than dancing in the moonlight with your baby. Ooh, dancing in the moonlight with your baby. Ooh, 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 come on, dancing in the moonlight. You, baby, and it feels so right. I'm so in love with you, honey. You turn me on each and every night.
And we're back. Hope you enjoyed that. So let's get into your number 3.
We know all about you, Julie. More than anything else, you want to belong, just to be one of the gang. You've met every challenge. Now comes the final test you didn't plan on. Well, Julie, welcome to the club. See One Dark Night. Rated PG.
Starts Friday at a theater near you. Check your local newspapers for listings.
Okay, my number 3 movie is one that I have only recently kind of had the pleasure of seeing for the first time. And it is a movie that was released in 1993 from the director Tom McLaughlin, who also gave us Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives. The movie is called One Dark Night, and it stars Meg Tilly. And this movie is it's another initiation film, kind of, like Hell Night, but this one is definitely of the PG variety. Not that Hell Night was particularly graphic or anything like that, but it did have some good kills in it. But this is definitely, to me, this movie is sort of like the perfect movie for a slumber party for 11-year-old girls. If they're into horror movies, I would hope that they would put this on the list. This is it's just such a wonderful thing. I think it would be perfect for that kind of thing. It's that sort of level where it's scary, but it's not too scary, and it's just fun. The story of the movie is that Meg Tilly plays Julie, who is this very trad, preppy in terms of dress girl who is being initiated into this I don't know, group. I don't know that I would call them a gang, but they have matching satin jackets. And it's called the Sisters. And she has to, in order to fulfill this initiation, she has to spend the night in a mausoleum. The trick about this movie is it's no ordinary mausoleum in that it has a brand new guest inside of the mausoleum. And this is a person who had these telekinetic powers. The film opens in a very effective opening on the city street where you see some coroners show up on the street, and it's like 5 or 6 white vans, all that are coroners, and so you know that something terrible has happened to necessitate all of these vans. And then you hear voiceover from a paramedic to a dispatcher or some group like that, some kind of duo like that, and they're talking about the scene there, and that's very hard to describe, but it's strange, and it is strange whenever you get into the apartment where the bodies are found. There are all sorts of things that are objects from the room that are thrust into the walls, like forks and things like that, and that have gone in there mysteriously, and all the girls are found crumpled into various states of post-mortem decay, and some of them are newer bodies in the closet, which is a very creepy thing. And it's, I don't know, it may be, I think it would fit for an 11-year-old kid, but it definitely is trying to scare you, and it is creepy in that sense. So we get Meg into the mausoleum, and that's where the guy is interred, the one who had who killed the girls, who had the telekinetic powers. He's described as a psychic vampire, which is, a real thing, but in this sense, what he's done is inflicted trauma on people or animals, and sort of fed off of that energy that they give out, and that feeds his powers of telekinesis. So when Meg is in the mausoleum, her friends are dropping her off, and there's definitely a friend of hers who is a bully type character, who I believe is named Olivia in this movie. But comparing her to the bully in Jennifer, it's nowhere near as bad. She's not as terrible as that girl. But one of the sisters gives her. She says, take some downers, take a couple of downers, and you'll just be able to sleep through the night. It'll be no problem. But they aren't downers. They're actually very powerful opioid painkillers that are going to really make being in a mausoleum very not fun for Meg Tilly. So she's there, and the girls come in to try to scare her, and they do scare her along the way. But at the same time, the killer's powers awaken, and he starts reanimating corpses in a very, very effective sequence. And it, to me, is just a lot of fun, and I loved putting this movie on the list. And it's very high on the list because, like I said, it just kind of hitting the appeal, which I would imagine would be for, like a slumber party for younger kids, and something that's still horror, but, not too graphic. Kind of like The Gate, but The Gate I didn't put on this list because the kids seem to be a little preteen to me, but just so much fun. And I'm so glad that I saw it this year. And this was the other movie that I had mentioned that I wanted to talk about on this list when we were kind of discussing this episode. What were your thoughts?
I am a huge fan of One Dark Night. I think I've talked about it at least 2 or 3 times in this podcast, so I probably won't get into it. But thank you so much for adding it, because I think it really needs to be seen by more people. It has a Blu-ray release now, I think by Scorpion put it out. I can't remember who, Code Red or Scorpion.
Code Red, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
It looks great. It really does need more love because it's just such a wonderful debut film by Tom McLaughlin. He puts a lot of effort into it and makes it kind of a special movie about its subject, about teens in peril, and just the reanimating of the dead and how creepy a mausoleum can be at night. And I know he takes a lot of pride in his earlier films. I think he's mentioned that he would like to even do a remake of this movie because the central idea is so strong, and it could be translated again in another kind of film. And I would like to see that too. But I think generally, though, I think more people should see this movie if they haven't seen it. Yes, don't be afraid of the PG rating. I think it's a very strong film. It's made in a very low budget. And that alone, just to see what you can do at a low budget sometimes, kind of surprises me. Meg Tilly's good in the movie. She's a good final girl to follow. The bitchy, I forgot her name in the movie. Is it Carol? One of them is Carol.
Carol, yeah.
Olivia,
I can't remember.
Yeah, but the bitches are good. I like the character with the toothbrush.
She just likes the way it tastes.
She just likes the way it tastes. It's very memorable, and it always stays with me. And again, a girl gang in a movie. We've got 2 girl gangs in our list. With their own jackets. Why not? Big thing in the 80s. Seems to be a big thing in the early to mid 80s. Grease 2. Seemed to happen a lot. I want to join my own girl gang. I don't know if I'd want to stay in a mausoleum or a Garth Manor like in these movies, but there's always fun settings that they put these 80s movies in. I like that. I like that about those movies. They put them in fun, creepy settings and see what would happen. Things that go bump in the night. And then, of course, the real terror begins after practical jokes are happening with characters and these initiations. I've always had fun with these kinds of movies. I think they just kind of, they play upon your fears and tensions and anxiety with dealing with when you're a teenager, dealing with the possibility of death and stuff. And they do it in very playful ways and creepy ways, and they're just real entertainments. And I like them a lot. And I'm glad you picked One Dark Night. It's definitely a favorite of mine. And I have the original poster.
Nice.
I have, I've had the DVD, the VHS copy before that. So I've been a fan for this movie for a really long time. So I feel like it's a good friend at this point in my life.
Well, we'll have to get our own satin jackets, and I actually have an idea for that. I want to do satin jackets of, the movie Death Wish Club.
Oh my God!
Using like Death Club in there, and having that be sort of embroidered on the back of a black satin jacket. So, if you want to be in that club, you're invited.
Oh my God! Of course I would be. Yeah, I'd be the secretary if you want me to be.
I'd be treasurer.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Sign me up for that, please, and sign me up for One Dark Night. Get the Blu-ray, guys. It's amazing. Tom McLaughlin, if you like Friday the 13th Part 6, if you like Date with an Angel, he's made some fun movies. This is his first movie, so check it out if you haven't seen it. My number 3, here's a TV spot.
My name is Martin, and I'm 84 years old. People think I'm crazy when I tell them how old I am, or else they think I'm some kind of ghost.
From the director of Night of the Living Dead, Martin, another kind of terror.
I just have a sickness. I just need to drink blood.
I went with Martin because I wanted to get some George Romero in there. I think when it's Halloween time, you want to get some of the classic directors and you want to revisit some of their movies. To me, Martin is one of his best movies. And it focuses on, of course, this character Martin, who is this guy who believes he's a vampire. And he's a young guy, so he's a teenager, and he believes he's a vampire. I mean, that central idea alone, and then where the movie goes with it is really interesting and unusual and scary and creepy at the same time too, because it becomes like a home invasion movie, becomes kind of a gothic movie. There's some interesting flashbacks and storytelling techniques that George Romero is doing with this film. This is quite a few years out from, I would say this is 10 years out from his Night of the Living Dead. He made a few films before this. I feel like this is when he's starting to hit a stride again as a filmmaker. He did, I can't remember if he did this before Dawn of the Dead. I'm not sure which came first, but two epics back to back for me. Of course, Dawn of the Dead is a zombie epic, and here with a kind of a smaller, intimate tale of a teenager who may or may not be a vampire. I like that the movie kind of leaves it a little bit open for your interpretation. Certainly, he has family members who believe he is, and that goes to some interesting places. This movie utilizes Pittsburgh in an interesting way. It really do feel you get the idea of that town, and the feeling of that town comes across in this movie. It really has a lot of atmosphere, and I like the use of the talk show, radio call-in show as a device. A few movies have used it since then, but I feel like this is probably an early example of it in a horror movie. And good central performance by John Amplas as Martin. I think that's the real selling point. I remember the VHS artwork when I was a kid really scared me. Really freaked me out. I wouldn't say the movie freaks me out so much as definitely some really creepy scenes in it. But because it's done from Martin's point of view, you kind of have to side with the killer in the way, and that that kind of forces you to accept some of the things that happens in the movie and maybe not be quite as scared as you would in a movie where it's like a hidden killer or someone just kind of coming out of the dark to get you. But it really is unsettling, but it's never in a way that's hard to watch. George Romero just does a great job as a director here, and I've always thought it was one of his best films. How about you?
This is on my list of shame. I have not seen this movie all the way through. I did borrow this one for the podcast, but I believe I'm going to say it's a region B, but I don't know. I actually didn't test it. I was kind of doing some other stuff this week with this Halloween preparation, and this one kind of fell through the cracks. Mm-hmm. I did make attempts to see this movie when I was a little kid, far too young to be watching Dawn of the Dead, which I saw Dawn of the Dead and I was just sort of immediately fascinated by it and wanted to see his other movies, and rented this movie on VHS. And at the time I had a hard time watching it because the murky VHS tape and the pace of it was, to me, it was very difficult at my young age to kind of get through.
Sure.
And I just remember some of the stuff in the movie, some of the visuals in the movie, but mostly I remember like trying a couple times but not getting through this movie. And I looked at the IMDb page and it said it has a running time of 95 minutes, and I was kind of shocked because it seemed to me like it was going on forever when I was a kid. So it is definitely one that I need to get to, and it's kind of one of the big holes in my horror watching experience. I need to definitely remedy that soon, and watch this one for the late George Romero. I guess I'm more drawn to nowadays to the movies like Monkey Shines and of course the Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead and Night of the Living Dead, but haven't really gone back to those earlier films.
Yeah, I would definitely, of his earlier films, I would definitely go back to this one and give it a reevaluation, because I feel like he was doing some interesting things with storytelling and technique, as well as just what he was trying to convey. It's a very intelligent horror movie, much like his Dawn of the Dead is and Night of the Living Dead is. I feel like if much like Wes Craven, I feel like Wes Craven imparted a lot of intelligence into his movies. I feel like George Romero was doing that as well. So I always appreciated that about his movies. But they didn't also skip on the gore. So that's good too. I would definitely check it out again if you can. When you can. It's strangely not available on Blu-ray. It was I think the DVD might be even out of print. Anchor Bay put it out on DVD. I have that, and I think it might have been re-released by someone else. So it's strange that it hasn't, got a Blu-ray. Maybe I think maybe it's a rights issue with that one. I think maybe the rights holder, the producer, John Rubenstein, might own it. So now that Romero is gone, I feel like, and they've been re-releasing his earlier works. They really need to get around to Martin and give it a proper release. I feel like more people appreciate it with a new release, for sure. All right, our number twos. Here's yours.
It Follows is the #1 horror movie in America.
Mom, is that you?
Do not watch this alone. It Follows. Rated R. Now playing.
Okay, my number 2 movie is actually a fairly recent movie. It was released in 2015, directed by David Robert Mitchell, who directed the movie The Myth of the American Sleepover and the upcoming Under the Silver Lake. The movie is called It Follows, and it is something that can be the plot can be said in a sentence, and it's basically that a young woman is followed by a supernatural force after having a sexual encounter, and the plot of the movie is definitely of the it's of the chain letter type template, and but to me the real appeal of the movie, it to me is a very scary movie that starts off very scary. It's the cinematography, the way that the movie is shot, lots of wide angle shots with a very sure hand. I haven't seen the director's other movies, but this one seems to be very influenced by John Carpenter, and it has a score that is not like mimicking John Carpenter like you see in some other movies, but it's its own thing. But it's also kind of an intense experience in and of itself. We were talking about movies that have their metaphors kind of right out there and are really going with them, and they're sort of on the surface, but for a reason. This movie is more the amount that is explained and not explained. It's more tantalizing, I think, to maybe talk about, especially like if you compared it to some other movie, like say The Ring, where if you watch the movie, if you watch The Ring video, you die in 7 days, and you have to have somebody else watch it to pass it on. People, when that movie came out, they weren't talking about what The Ring represents so much as they were in this movie, and It Follows. And I think there's definitely things that you could talk about with that, but to me, the real appeal for it is the style of the movie. The cinematography, the exteriors, the score, and it really sets a mood that really scared me. And that's pretty rare in movies at the theater. There are definitely movies that scare me from time to time. Most recently, I was scared by the movie Hereditary, but I know that Hereditary and this movie, there are people who love it and people who do not like it. So I'm curious to hear kind of what your reaction is to this movie.
It's interesting how people have such strong reactions to this movie. I guess that's a testament to the filmmaker to get reaction, right? That's kind of what you want as a filmmaker. I love this movie. I think it grabs me every time I watch it. I've watched it like a few times now. And it just kind of really, once that opening scene, which kind of does feel a little bit reminiscent of John Carpenter, and it's tracking shots, and just the way the camera moves and how it sets up suburbia as this place where dark things can happen. And it just kind of really struck a chord with me on that first initial viewing, and then subsequent viewings I've picked up like other things and interesting things about it. It's definitely a movie that kind of lends, like a movie like Donnie Darko, where it has like layers to it, and you kind of notice things on multiple viewings. There's some, like, I'm not saying it's a perfect movie. It has maybe like the battle at the end with the pool is maybe not as compelling as it probably could be. But I think the movie has a lot of intelligent things in it. And I think it has a lot of good scares in it, and real creepy vibe that just kind of permeates throughout the entire movie. And just kind of puts me on unease throughout the whole thing when I watch it. I just feel like I'm just compelled, and I just really get into it every time I see it. And that's what a good horror movie does, and a good score, like you said, that kind of works on its own and kind of puts you in a kind of a certain mood while listening to that. And the combination of the two together make for a very interesting way to provoke reaction, I would say. And it's a really well done horror movie. It was my favorite movie of that year when it came out. I think that was 2015, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
it was. I would definitely say that within the first couple of minutes of that movie, and you don't see this a lot in horror movies, where horror movies take their time setting things up and stuff. But this one was very intense and scary in the first couple minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So with that really strong opening, it's kind of like hard to have an ending or a climax that really kind of matches that.
Right.
That intensity, and I think that the climax of the movie does kind of take it in a different direction that is a little bit jarring. There's also some great shots in that climax, but I agree with you. It isn't quite there for me. But the ending after that, I do like that, the open-endedness of it.
Oh, the very end of the movie is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I think it ends on a perfect note. I like that. There's a lot of like those kinds of 70s horror movies that I like a lot. That have kind of a vibe about it, a creepiness, where just kind of a foreboding quality. It kind of matches a lot of those kinds of movies. It feels like a little bit like Let's Scare Jessica to Death. Certainly, where like people who are in this town who are bandaged and old and you're not quite sure what their motivations are, or they're after you. It has a bit of that. It has John Carpenter. It has some of that creepy vibe of movies like that, like Soul Survivor, where the dead are kind of coming after you, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Where you're kind of like caught in a nightmare in a way. The movie kind of sets up its own little universe as well. So I like that about it. It kind of is its own thing, and I know there was supposed to be a sequel. There was talks of a sequel, but that never kind of happened, did it?
Good.
Yeah, because maybe not. Maybe it doesn't. Yeah, maybe you shouldn't mess with something that really works, right? Sometimes.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head there with the nightmare analogy, because it is very much like you're inside of a nightmare in this movie.
It feels like that. I mean, that's why maybe like kind of like some things in the movie like feel kind of surreal. I mean, like, why is that happening? Like, who's that? Why is that character using like reading a book through like whatever it was, and it's just because there's a surreal quality to it that kind of feels like a nightmare. I kind of dream like that. I have weird dreams like that. Very kind of surreal. Sometimes they get very detailed. And I feel like I'm just trapped in something that sometimes I want to escape in these nightmares. And I don't know. I like it. I like that about it. It really does feel like it preys on teens' anxieties and of course sexual frustrations and hang-ups and things like that. The nervousness of obviously of sexually transmitted diseases. A lot's been said about that element of the movie, but to me, it's really just a good look at teens and going through this scary stuff. I really dig it. Here is the TV spot for my number 2.
Poor Virginia. Just when the rich young snobs at Crawford High condescended to come to her birthday party, they're all being murdered in the most bizarre ways imaginable. No one will be seated during the last 10 minutes of Happy Birthday to Me. Pray you're not invited.
Rated R. Starts Friday at a theater near you.
I saw this in the theater. It was at the Low State Theater. It did pretty well at the box office, like $10 million, because of the slasher movie craze of the early 80s. But Happy Birthday to Me was no Friday the 13th Part 2. Ironically, when this movie left the theater that I saw it at 1 week later, it was replaced with Friday the 13th Part 2. It's kind of an interesting slasher movie. I think I might have talked about this movie on the podcast before, because it's Melissa Sue Anderson from Little House on the Prairie, Glenn Ford. It's released through Columbia Pictures, so it kind of has like a pedigree behind it. It's like J. Lee Thompson directed it, like a real director. Kind of feels like a bigger movie. Feels like a big studio movie. Although it's about teenagers and getting killed off one by one by a hidden killer. So it's like the typical slasher movie, but made with like this pedigree behind it, which is just kind of interesting and like an interesting quality to it. I've always really liked this movie. To me, it always is kind of best representative of that time period of slasher movies, where you get the kills and inventive kills, and you get this killer that who you're not sure who it is, and then there's a big reveal at the end, and it's like sometimes they're totally ridiculous, like they are in this movie, or sometimes they're kind of more believable. But I like that it's like ridiculous and convoluted because it's like a movie. It's not real life. If this was a real life situation, you'd be a bit more stressed out and feel a little bit more upset. Here you just kind of want to see these characters get killed off. Like you want to see someone get shish kebab to death, or their scarf being put into a motorcycle, or
weights dropped on their nuts.
Yeah, weights on the nuts. The old weights on the nuts bit. People do get killed off in fun ways, and you kind of have to figure out who the killer is. And then this movie kind of throws you for a loop with that reveal, for sure.
A couple of loops.
It's a really fun movie, and it really holds up for me. Because it is just reminds me of that time of watching these slasher movies as a kid. Like, what am I watching? This movie's nuts. Like, I can't believe adults make these movies. Like, people who are like a lot older than I am are making these movies. Like, what is wrong? This is what you do? You grow up and you make like ridiculous movies like this. But I love that. It's pure silliness in a way, but also fun and scary in its own way too. Well, maybe not so much scary, this one, but it's fun. I enjoy it for sure. How about you?
Well, I want to echo a couple of things that you said. Let's start off with the pedigree of the film. It was directed by J. Lee Thompson, who did Guns of Navarone. And so watching this movie with an adult eye, I'm looking at some of the shots. And I'm like, whoa, these are nicely composed things. Oh, they're using split diopter here, and so it's definitely done with some care. And then it goes pretty nuts later, which I will kind of get to in a minute. But when I saw it as a kid, I think it was one of the more memorable movies to me and I loved horror, of course, one of the more memorable movies of the 80s for me because of the creativity of the kills. And I'm speaking specifically of the one where the guy gets the guy's lifting the weights and the killer drops the flat weight on his groin. And they're done very bloodily, and I think they are creative, and I think that's sort of the selling point to me, a selling point of the movie. That's your angle right there. You can market that movie, and they did it. John will never eat shish kebab again, although the character was not named John, and that's not really a picture of him on the poster, but it's an effective poster. It definitely makes me want to see that movie. So I was watching it again, and I'm really glad that you put this movie on the list. And I remember being kind of lukewarm to the movie, or maybe not liking the movie at the end. And so I'm watching this movie and I'm really enjoying it. I'm like, wow, this is reminding me of like a Giallo film, at the beginning, and there's all this stuff going on and the creative kills, and I'm like, this is really actually a pretty good movie. And then we get to the end of the film, the climax of the film. I just have to say that, during the film and the reveal and the stuff that happens at the end, I feel like, maybe watching the movie, it's like Bill Murray watching the reveal in Tootsie, where Dustin Hoffman reveals himself to be not a woman. It's like, that is one nutty birthday party. It is. The movie goes. Just like, it has an intense scene before that too, kind of like a chase in the rain scene. It was actually pretty intense, and there's a character in the scene who's doing something that you don't normally see, just kind of like totally in shock, and it's sort of a well done scene. And then after that, you have this nutty reveal, and then something else that happens that's nutty, and it's like it gets really hard off the rails, and then it kind of comes back again, but in a different place than you thought it was. And so it's not like one of those movies to me where you watch it and at the end you have this reveal that makes you want to watch the movie closer, to like look at the plot and see the clues and everything like that. To me, it's like you want to watch the movie again, and it is kind of a fascinating movie, but you want to watch it and it's like, was I watching it right the first time? How should I be appreciating this movie? Because it does have a lot to like. But boy, that ending is very nuts. If you haven't seen this movie, we're not revealing that, but I think everyone who does see that will agree that it's not expected.
No. Like, okay, so they're gonna reveal that person to be the killer. And then what? Then that happens. Interesting, like that those bodies around the birthday kind of thing happened a lot in that time period. There was another movie called Madhouse from 1981 that happens at the end of that movie. And there's another movie too, I'm trying to think, around that time period where it happens too. Seemed to be a very common thing to happen in horror movies.
Yeah, I'm reminded of the Fall Break movie. I can't remember. It was called Fall Break, but then there was the other title, and like all the bodies are on the meat hooks at the end. And,
the Mutilator. Yeah,
the Mutilator. Yeah. So stuff like that, and maybe you have that in Madman too. I don't remember, but it seems like a familiar trope. But it's definitely appropriate in this scene. Oh, and there's so much. I think another thing about this movie is the flashbacks in this movie, and kind of the reveal of the memories and stuff make it very tantalizing. Like, what's going to happen? What is going on? And those scenes with the brain surgery and stuff, they're pretty intense.
They're very intense.
Yeah. It's pretty intense stuff. And so it sort of sets you up for feeling a different way than you do when you do see the ending. So that's why I'm sort of fascinated by this movie, and I just want to know everything about it now.
I know. I feel like they were really going for broke with this movie. Like they really were like throwing as much as they could into it. It's like actually kind of long for a slasher movie. It's like, it feels like almost a full 2 hours, where most slasher movies are like 80, 90 minutes. There's a lot in here. There's a lot of texture in this one.
It's the longest movie of any of our lists today for sure.
But I don't mind that about it, because I just kind of get caught up in it every time I watch it. The Hysteria Continues podcast, I did a commentary for the Indicator Blu-ray for it. I know Justin Kurzweil, who wrote the slasher movie book, he's a big fan of this movie. That was one of his movies that really got him into slasher movies. So it's to me, the best, one of the better examples of movies of that kind of the time, for sure. So I go back to it a lot, as silly as it can be, but some obvious cheats and of how they of the red herrings too don't really bother me. I mean, because it's whatever. It's just it's trying to trick you into thinking so and so is a killer, and then but I don't mind that. I'm
really happy that this is so high on your list.
I like this movie so much that my wife, when we were dating, had someone make me a top 10 scarf. So I have a scarf somewhere that's like theirs in the movie that my wife had knitted for me. She had a friend who's a very passionate knitter. So she printed out a still from the movie with the scarves that they have in the movie, and that person made me a scarf. That's pretty awesome. Very surprising.
That's a great gift.
So I could have a satin jacket of Death Wish Club.
Yeah,
and
put that with
and the scarf from the top 10 of Crawford Academy. I like where this is going. All right, let's get into we did twos, now number ones. Let me just finish off the lists before I do that. Ara Alishan, our good pal Ara Alishan. Here are a few oddball selections just for kicks. Number 5, Fender Bender. Number 4, Far From Home from 1989. Number 3, Night Visitor from 1989. Number 2, The Guest. And number 1, Christine, which really could have counted as a teen angst flick as well. And although they aren't feature-length films, I will award my honorable mentions to the Raft segment of Creepshow 2 and the Bishop of Battle segment of Nightmares. Ara Alishan, you always come up with fun lists. Thank you so much, and you remind me of so many good things. I love it. I revisited Far From Home because he mentioned it on his list, and I had a lot of fun revisiting that desert slasher movie from the late 80s with Drew Barrymore. It's actually a good movie. I like it.
I've only seen a couple movies on this list. I'm going to have to check them out. And
Susan Tyrrell's in it. So.
Oh, yes.
You got to see that. Andrew Rooney, he wrote I Still Know What You Did Last Summer. He's a big fan of her singing in that movie. Dean Garman, The Lost Boys, Disturbing Behavior, Fright Night, Scream, Society, It Follows, Elm Street, Night Under the Comet, Night of the Creeps, My Best Friend is a Vampire, Monster Squad, Vamp, and Silver Bullet off the top of my head. And my good pal Daniel Archer, who hosted the Teen Angst podcast, his number 5 was Last House on the Left. His number 4 is Carrie. His number 3 is Fright Night. Number 2, Sleepaway Camp, 1 through 3. And his number 1, of course, is Friday the 13th, 1 through 7. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, everyone who wrote in your lists. Let's get right into your number 1. Here's the VHS ad for it.
Say you're sorry.
After an accidental murder, Ronald, a lonely and unpopular boy, takes refuge in a fantasy world.
All will be for nothing if we don't heed the rules.
Today I begin joining Princess Fancetta. She's the ruler of Atlanta.
an existence that becomes inescapable and deadly. Starring Kim Hunter, Dabney Coleman, and Scott Jacoby in a compelling thriller, Bad Ronald.
Okay, we went from your number 2 film, which was the longest film on the list, and we're going to my number 1 film, which is definitely the shortest movie on the list. I think it's a brisk 74 minutes, but it packs in a lot of stuff in that 74 minutes. And before I actually mention what this movie is, I've got a question for you, Michael.
Mm-hmm.
So you're in the real estate business, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So have you ever listed a house that had a perverted teenage boy living in the walls? And if so, how did that affect the price?
Well, as a realtor, you're supposed to disclose those kinds of things. I only disclose it half the time. So only half of all the boys that I've found living in the walls have been disclosed to my clients, and they kind of freaked out, I gotta say. But you get used to it after a while. So.
Well, I think that the viewers in 1974 watching ABC, this is a TV movie, were also freaked out by this film. We're living in a golden age of Blu-rays right now because this exists, and it just came out on Blu-ray recently from Warner Archive. It is the movie Bad Ronald. It's my number 1 movie for this list. It's directed by Buzz Kulik, who also directed some other big TV movies, including Brian's Song in 1971. And as promised, we have the return of Scott Jacoby, who was also in The Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane, and he stars as Ronald in this film. I just very recently watched this movie, and after having years and years of hearing that it was good, hearing the name pop up here and there, and boy, did it deliver. I loved this movie, and it shot right up to the number 1 spot here on this list. The story of the movie is Ronald is a teenage boy who lives with his very protective mother, and it's his birthday. She gives him a toolbox, and he leaves his mother for the day to go and visit a girl that he has a crush on at a pool party. He's sort of snubbed at the pool party, and he comes back and he's walking down this hill through this brush, and he accidentally bumps into a young girl who's riding a bicycle. And the young girl starts making fun of him, saying he's weird and all this other stuff. And, you get this vibe that people think that he's kind of a creep, from the pool party. And so he's okay with being teased about it, but then she says that your mother is weird too, and he kind of loses it and pushes her down, and there are all these cinder blocks around, and she falls and she hits her head on one of the cinder blocks and she dies. So cut to Ronald going back home, and his mother knows that something's wrong, and he tells her that he has accidentally killed this girl and that he buried her, which his mom thinks is a very big mistake, because now the police are not going to believe that it was in self-defense or anything like that. So her dream is for him to be a doctor and cure whatever is ailing her. She's been walking around with some visible pain, and so what she decides to do is to have Ronald take his tool chest, and they take the second bathroom, and they build a wall over it, and there's a little cubby hole where Ronald can go inside of it, and over that they put a lot of canned goods, like it's a pantry. So Ronald lives inside there and has to learn to be very quiet and not make any noise, because basically the mom thinks that if they stay there for a few months and then move away, this is all going to blow away and he can become a doctor and fulfill her dream for him. So I don't really think that I'm spoiling it too much by going a little bit more into the plot, because it's right there on the back of the of the Blu-ray. But there is a twist in this movie, and the twist is that the mother says that she's having to leave for a week. All this time she's feeding him in the wall, and she gives him a tray of food, and he gives her the tray from yesterday, and she's making sure that he he does his studies and that he does his exercises and everything. All the while, Ronald is living this rich fantasy life of this place called Atlanta that he's illustrating and kind of developing, and he's fitting in some of the other characteristics of these films because he's definitely an outcast, and he's experiencing some humiliation from the people that are making fun of him and everything. But what happens is the twist is that she goes away to the doctor, and Ronald is inside the wall, and the door opens a week later, and people come in talking about selling the house because his mother has died, and that's how he finds out she's died. And the movie progresses from there with a new family coming in. Ronald stays inside the walls and even develops some ways of getting around, puts in some keyholes, or puts in some little peepholes, and develops a fixation on the young girl that lives in the house. And I don't know, if I haven't grabbed you with that description, yeah, you're not going to like this movie. But to me, this is a great plot, great story. I loved it, and just it fit with his loneliness. It was a kind of a perfect use of the mother being sort of very overprotective by literally walling him up inside the house. It worked for me very well. Really loved this movie, and I have a feeling you really like the movie too, and I want to hear what you have to say about it.
Oh yeah, I've been a fan of this movie for a really long time now. I saw it as a kid on TV, one of its many reruns over the years, and I'm like, Bad Ronald sounds like, like I don't know quite what to expect. Like maybe it's gonna be silly, or I don't know. I just got really involved in it from that first viewing, and I like Scott Jacoby as an actor. Something very likable about him, but here he's playing this very complicated character, and you just kind of, even though you're like seeing it through his point of view, and you're just kind of like with him, even though he gets pretty nuts. As you would in that kind of situation, right?
Right.
You're just your mom is telling you to stay in the wall, and then you're trapped. You're kind of trapped there in a way. You make a bad decision, as the teenagers do, and a lot of teenagers, are making not the wisest choices in these movies because they are teenagers, and you just kind of learn from your mistakes. He makes a bad choice. He tries to cover up the death of this girl, and just makes his life so much harder. And he makes that mistake again in this movie, and just kind of really makes it much harder for himself because he just can't quite get it together like most people can. He's just missing that part of him. He's very much caught up in his fantasy world, and the movie makes a lot of interesting, not so much statements, but it throws these interesting ideas together about this guy Ronald and his world and his mind, and you really do feel like you travel into his mind. And I've always been intrigued by it, and I feel like I've always actually wanted a bit more of elaboration on his character, and not so much like a sequel or anything, but I don't know, maybe even a sequel where we can get to know more about Ronald and his maybe what's coming in from the inside of him in his mind. And I like that he's this artistic character who's just trying to create things and then just gets trapped in this situation. It's a very for a TV movie of the time, it just really feels like it separates itself from a lot of other things. You can kind of see why it's become a classic over the years, like Don't Be Afraid of the Dark, talked in the vein of those superior kind of scary horror movies. Even though it's not really quite scary, there's definitely some chilling moments in it, especially if you were a character living in this house and then just find out that someone's living in your wall would freak you the fuck out. I mean, if you weren't seeing it from his point of view and seeing it from her point of view, you would be truly scared of this guy, of this creepy guy. So it's interesting. And that it does put you in his shoes for most of it. So I like that about it. So glad you chose it. It's a really good one.
Yeah, I'm really glad that this one came out just very recently, because it's been on my to watch list for a long time, and it's been pretty scarce, and to have it be on Blu-ray is just wonderful. I'm so glad that Warner Archive put it out.
Yeah, I had the VHS tape, but for the longest time that thing was out of print. It was like one of those big box USA VHS tapes. Then I got the Warner Archive DVD when it came out. But man, this movie looks so good on Blu-ray. It looks better.
It looks amazing.
It looks better than it ever did. Like even when it aired, like it did not look good on like those old TVs back in the 70s and 80s. So this is the best Bad Ronald has ever looked. Now on Blu-ray, it's amazing. How some of these TV movies are given new life with Blu-rays. It's really cool to see that happen. I would have liked to see extras, but I'll take what I can get with this one for sure. But yeah, I'm happy it's on your list. Thank you for including it. It's so good. Here is my number one. Can you guess what it is? My favorite teen horror movie comes from 1980. Here it is.
Everyone in the senior class has a date for prom night. But someone has come to the prom alone. Someone who watches in the empty corridors. Someone who follows, silent and unseen. Someone who waits until no one can help. Prom night. If you're not back by midnight, you won't be coming home. Rated R.
Starts Friday at a theater or drive-in near you. Check your local paper for theater locations.
Okay, prom night. Of course it's prom night. It's not Halloween, because that's the 70s, and I've talked about Halloween before. Kind of obvious to talk about Halloween for a Halloween podcast. I'm doing prom night because it is out of sight. I grew up with this movie. I watched it a lot with my younger sister. We watched it like every other week throughout prom night. It was a very early VHS purchase for me. So I got good wear out of that VHS tape for sure. It just really, I don't know. It hit all the right notes for me for what I wanted out of a horror movie growing up. A good slasher movie, masked killer. You got the school setting, you have Jamie Lee Curtis, you have disco dancing, you have really good bitchy character, you have sympathetic characters and relatable characters and jerky characters and it had everything that I wanted from a slasher movie from the 80s and the early 80s, and so I was obsessed with it and I watched it a lot, and I still watch it a lot. I have the Synapse Prom Night Blu-ray, which is a good Blu-ray. No extras from Jamie Lee Curtis that I don't remember on there, sadly. I don't think she's as fond of her post-Halloween output as we are, as fans. I think she's a fan of Halloween too. That's what I remember, but not so much Prom Night and Terror Train, sadly, because those are fun movies.
Terror Train's a great movie.
Yeah, Terror Train is really well done too. But I gravitate to Prom Night because it is the most teen of those movies in a way, because it really is set in the high school. A lot of the action revolves in the high school, the central conceit of the killer who may be connected to a murder or an unintentional murder that happened is, of course, something that's been used in lots of slasher movies since, and a lot of fun slasher movies like House and Sorority Row, and and so on in the 80s. But it was done here well, and very memorable opening sequence, and the killer, I think, is very memorable, and then it goes to a place, an unexpected place at the end of this movie, in a very kind of a denouement that is very dramatic and sad, and what's up until that point been a kind of a fun and not so much silly, but more fun and just enjoyable slasher movie, and it goes to a really kind of sad and emotional place at the end, and has a kind of resonance that you kind of was surprising, and I really bonded with this movie so greatly as a kid, and because of all those elements, and I think it still holds up for me. There's some pacing issues, I guess, if you want to call that. There's unnecessary cop characters or whatever, but I don't know. It's a movie of its time, so I don't mind that it moves at a slower, leisurely pace, and I think it does build a good amount of tension and atmosphere in this high school, and with the killer and lurking in the halls, and really great chase sequence with Wendy, who's one of the ultimate slasher movie bitches. She's really good, and she gets the best chase sequence in the movie. And I like Jamie Lee in the movie. I think she's immediately sympathetic, and she's cute, and someone you can follow. Her character is a bit stronger, I would say, in Terror Train, and less strong in Halloween 2. Sorry, Jamie Lee, but you're sedated for half that movie. But I don't know. I've always dug it, and I go back to it a lot, and I will continue to. It's out of sight for me. How about you?
For me, I think that the movie is interesting in that you look at some of the conventions of some of these genres, and particularly the slasher genre. It's very well defined. Like your typical slasher movie, and this one hits all those boxes of a slasher movie template. From the prank gone wrong at the beginning to the overabundance of red herrings, like you mentioned, with those possibly unnecessary police officers in the film.
Creepy janitor.
The creepy janitor, yeah. Were you reminded of the guy from the creepy janitor or the groundskeeper from Pieces as well? Mm-hmm. As one of those possible red herrings, possibly the killer, possibly a red herring. Who knows? There's so many people to choose from in these movies. I think that the movie has a very effective opening. That killer is coming game that the kids play is creepy, and it's probably for me the most memorable scene in the movie. Jamie Lee's very good in this movie. I like the movie. I wish that she had more to do, kind of like I wish she had more to do in the new Halloween. But I mean, that's just speaking to the fact that she's a great presence, amazing actress, and I'd love to see her do, just all Jamie Lee all the time, basically. Mm-hmm. I do like the climax of the movie. I'm not laughing at the denouement that you mentioned, but at the very end. But what happens on the dance floor and during the disco, that's a lot of fun. And the disco scene and the movie's theme song, Prom Night. Yeah, that's going to be in your head forever. That's never.
It plays a lot. That song plays a lot. They get a lot of mileage out of that song.
Yeah. I do like this movie. It's probably not my favorite movie on your list, but it's fun and it's pretty iconic, and I think that it's one that there is a kind of a mixed reaction from folks about. Mm-hmm. They're not so universally into this film as they might be universally into, say, I don't know, something comparable that's not as iconic as Halloween, but they might really I don't know. There's something about it that doesn't gel with everyone. I don't know if it's the disco stuff or what, but for me the best part of the movie is the very beginning, and that's a hard scene to top.
It's true. Yeah, Jamie doesn't. Maybe he's not given as much to do with the screenplay. Maybe. Well, there's a reason for it too, because
yes,
because of who the killer turns out to be. But also, she gets a disco dance.
Mm-hmm.
So, what she makes up, what she lacks in, like she lacks in, like, things to do. She makes up for it in disco dancing, and she's great. She really carries that dance scene because her partner is not very good at all. When you watch him, he's just kind of like moving and flailing his hands around. And she's like really like moving. She's like really leading that dance. Really good disco dance, I gotta say.
Famously parodied in Airplane as well.
Yeah. Yes. Saturday Night Fever. That kind of disco scene. I like that era of that kind of disco stuff. It is of its time, very much of its time, but it's very enjoyable to watch on screen, I gotta say. And just that whole that prom night dance sequence just really sticks out. Of course, the beheading of a certain character, and the kills just really stick out with me. And I liked a lot of the characters that died too, and that's unusual for a slasher movie. Like when I watched Halloween, like I didn't care about most of the the characters who died. I'm like, okay, yep, next. Well, that jerky person didn't die. How come that person didn't die, but everyone else did? But it was that I feel like the deaths in Prom Night for me have more of a resonance. I don't know, because I guess because you're with these characters a bit longer, and they kind of set them up a lot, and they have a lot more scenes and things to do, and that's what the difference between slasher movies of then and now. Like that's what they would do back then. They would just set up their characters more, and then when they got killed off, you kind of felt bad for them because you just had more time with them, and just the way it was back then. Now they just kind of seem to die off pretty quickly, like certain babysitters in the New Moon. Yeah, it was really fun talking about these teen horror movies with you. My voice has gone a little deeper. I'm getting over a cold, so reaching places with my voices that I haven't been to in a while. A little bit delirious.
Well, you're doing a great job. This was a fun one to kind of tackle and revisit a lot of these films, and especially to watch them in not in sequence, but like in rapid fire order, and you start to see these similar scenes, and like a lot of these scenes that take place in the science class, and they're kind of similar to each other. I got to say that watching these movies, I don't know if there's any kind of like takeaways and stuff like that. We sort of gone over some of the main themes that we've done, just been talking with you about these films. But I got to say, one thing that sort of sticks out for me was I watched the movie Cutting Class for this, and I got to say Donovan Leitch's haircut in that movie, that's pretty rough. It's like that was hard to watch.
His haircut, really?
Yeah, his haircut was it was like a buzz cut that was growing out like a little bit, but it was longer in the back, and it was wow, it was hard to watch. It was maybe the hardest thing to watch in that movie.
Oh my god, late 80s hair, for all of us was not so good. 1989 hair, I think that's when that movie was made. Just not good. But I can't wait to watch that in high definition. That's coming out from Vinegar.
The uncut, yeah,
Vinegar Syndrome. That's going to be amazing to see in high definition. I'm actually a fan of that movie too, because it's just, it has a fun, I guess, balance of comedy and horror. That's horror movies at the time weren't quite successful with. That one I think is pretty successful in that horror comedy balance. But yeah, going through all these movies, we got some we got to talk about some fun ones, some crazy ones, some sleazy ones. I feel like we covered all. We got TV movies in there. We covered and some modern things too, which we covered all our bases for teen horror for tonight and for Halloween. And it was so much. Yeah, the best part of this podcast is always revisiting these movies and just watching them, enjoying them, and just appreciating them for what they are. Because that's what movies are for.
Yeah,
that's why we love them. Thank you for joining me on this journey.
Thank you for inviting me. It was so much fun, and I just want to say happy Halloween to everyone out there listening. And it's been a blast doing this podcast.
And happy Halloween, guys! We'll be back. I'm gonna do an episode 50 soon, so we'll see what that's gonna end up being. But thank you so much, and it's also going to be the anniversary of the podcast too, so that's coming up. Thank you, Patreon supporters, for supporting the show. I've been doing the bonus episodes for that. Thank you, everyone. You can always find the podcast on retromovielove.com. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and now Spotify. So we're all over the internet. Just look for Retro Movie Love Podcast. You'll find us. You can download us. You can take us with you anywhere you want. In the car, in the gym. Just don't take us from the movie theater, because that's where we live. Pretty much. Any good screenings coming up for you?
Any good screenings? Let's see. Well, I am going to Dallas on Sunday, and I'm seeing Suspiria, but maybe the new one, but also definitely the old one. They're showing the old one, and it's going to be live accompanied by Goblin.
Oh my God.
Yeah. If they're coming to your town or anywhere near your state or anywhere near, I would definitely urge you to look that up and see if you can make it.
David goes to all the good screenings. I go to the movie theater and see whatever. He goes to he gets to see Goblin perform Spirit live. That's amazing. Well, enjoy it, and let me know how the remake is. I haven't seen it. It's 2.5 hours, so I need to block out 3.5 hours of my day to go see Suspiria. Just let me know what your thoughts, and we'll talk about it on a podcast, I'm sure.
Will do. Thank you so much.
Happy Halloween, guys. Thank you for joining us. We'll talk soon. Ciao for now.
Halloween! I'm Dumpy the Pumpkin, the fresh ice cream cake made daily at Carvel. And here's my good friend, Wiki the Witch.
Are you having a Halloween party? Go to your participating Carvel ice cream store and ask to see us, Dumpy the Pumpkin, and me, Wiki the Witch. Or if you want to send one of us to a friend...
Please phone 800-327-GIFT and call the Cake Honors most major credit cards. Thank you.
Hello, darling, and welcome to Friday Night Videos. I'm Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, but you can just think of me as one great big Halloween treat. And believe me, you won't find anything better in your sack.
If you're faint of heart or scare easily, please close your eyes. Channel 11 is giving you 4 nights of the creeps. Creepy creatures, creepy people, creepy primetime features. It's really gross. Creep Show 1 and 2, Night of the Creeps, and Return of the Living Dead Part 2.
Excuse me, the creeps.
Start Monday on Channel 11. You can look now. Gosh.